few minutes and you'll start the time. Okay. The time. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Roberts. I serve as the lead servant of Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church here in Edna, Texas, 604 MLK Drive. This is our first, I want to say annual, but first panel discussion that we're calling our town hall meeting. The Bible says in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, that my people are destroyed or my people perish because of a lack of knowledge. And so the objective of our gathering, our assembling today, is to equip ourselves with some resources and some knowledge as it relates to some of the challenges that are going on in our community. Some of them are enduring their perennial issues that we've been dealing with for many, many years, and we want to seek to find a solution. But we also want to seek to unify with persons within our community, no matter their background, whether it be nationality or their religious tradition. We want to partner together because we know that there's productivity and prosperity in unity. We do seek to be honest and open regarding the issues and the challenges of our community. In Edna, Texas, we call this side of town where I am located since I've been a kid, the hood. And so it is our objective to put neighbor back in the hood. We want to be good Samaritans, and we want to lend a hand to those who have fallen by the wayside and have been battered by life and an oppressive system that many times causes us to live in a situation where we are simply just surviving rather than thriving, because in some instances the system is corrupt, and it's a challenge for us to overcome the odds that are stacked against us. And so our scriptural basis, as I have previously stated, comes from Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. The Bible says that we perish because of a lack of knowledge, or we are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. We're going to pray and ask God to bless our time together so that the time that we share together will be fruitful. I also want to say that our objective is not just to explore the problems of our community and Black America, but we also want to shift the conversation to talk about practical solutions as to how we can address some of the issues in our community. Shall we pray? Eternal God, our Father, how we thank you again today for the privilege of being in your house of prayer. One more time, we thank you for your son Jesus, who died on the cross so that we may have life to the right to the tree of life. And we thank you for this privilege to gather together today to have this conversation that is much so needed, not just in Edna, but all across our nation. And we pray, Lord, that as we are divided as a country politically, racially, economically, in so many different ways, we pray, Lord, that your will be done. But you said in your word, if my people which are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal the land. And we pray today, Lord, that you would heal the land. We pray, Lord, that you would cause whites and blacks to come together. We pray that you would call Hispanics, Asians, that we will walk together with one mind and one heartbeat. We all really want the same things. We want liberty and justice for all. And we remember what King said, that if we're not willing to die for anything, then we're really not really willing to live until we've been willing to die for something. And so we pray today, Lord, that you would give us that passion, that zeal for justice, so that all can have the same opportunity, where our lives are marked by equality and by love. And you said in your word that love covers a multitude of sin. And so we pray, Lord, that you will put that unconditional love in our hearts, so this world may be a better place for all people and not just a few people. We pray these things done in your son Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. We're going to start with you, Shanna. Shanna Brooks, if you will share with us who you are, where you're from, what has you here today, what's on your heart, and what's your objective for being here today.
Okay. Well, my name is Shanna Brooks. I'm originally from Houston. I'm a Army veteran. I did go on to Texas Southern University, where I graduated with business management. I've been in Edna for a while now, as far as I came back because of my family's here. I'm currently the Juneteenth president in this area, and my main goal is to keep everyone involved in the community because there was a time where there weren't any type of Juneteenth celebrations or any acknowledgments. But not only that, we do have the Juneteenth celebration, but we also try to do things for the community every month and always get the kids involved and the youth because, of course, they need someone to look up to. That's my main goal and my main focus. And I always try to help out as far as anything dealing with the community, because if we don't help out, then who else will?
Amen.
Pass it on to Tubby.
How's everybody doing? Good afternoon. My name is Derek Boston. I'm actually originally from Edna, Texas. I've been born and raised here all my life. I'm actually very honored and privileged to be here amongst this panel and for this discussion that we need most necessarily have for our community. I started a group known as the Neighborhood Cleanup Committee, as far as myself, Morris Hopes, and Wendy Miller. We started Neighborhood Cleanup Committee because we wanted to make a change, and we figured that there was a time for change. There was a time that was going on, there was a lot of things going on in our country, in our world that, no one had control of. So things kind of touch bases real close when it comes to Edna. They actually was privileged to have a peaceful protest at the Jackson County Courthouse Square. I was actually on my way to work that evening, working nights. And I had a sign made for a specific reason. It wasn't just about Black Lives Matter. It was about all the injustice that we continue to face in our community. It wasn't just about Black Lives Matter. It was just about everybody's life should matter. So I took the initiative to say, where could I stand at? What could I do to make a change? There were some wicked times in my life where I know I needed to change, and God was calling me for something, and I never knew what. So I said, what could I do? So I started picking up trash. I called on 16, maybe 17 people came out with me on a Saturday morning, and we walked around this entire community, and we picked up trash. It was a great outpour from what we did. Thanks to the Juneteenth Committee, they were very participant with us as far as helping us along the way, and we ended up getting a pretty good outpour from it. The city mayor, the city manager, they reached out to us and gave us great thanks and wanted to know where they could fit in at with what we're doing. And we went to them at that time and discussed with them where we know where the city and the community has to come together somewhere. We're going to need the volunteers. So I took the stand, and with a lot of volunteers, along with myself, to take a stand on cleaning up our community. We want to keep the trash out of our ditches. We started a Feed the Can, Not the Land campaign, to where we want to put 5 trash cans out at 5 different stop signs. To feed the can, not the land. To keep people from throwing their debris in the ditches and in people's yards, and what we can give our community people those perks with these nice yards, that keep their yards mowed and pretty. We need to be able to acknowledge these people with Yard of the Month. So those are the goals that we're trying to do as far as cleaning up our community. And that's my focus with what we're here to do. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Dennis Powell. It's an honor to be invited here. Thank you, Pastor. It's also an honor to meet you, gentlemen. I'm originally from San Antonio, but I was raised here in Edna, off and on. And I think the biggest thing for me is beyond support. I'm also a moderator for the Juneteenth Committee, and I was invited by Mr. Boston and Shannon herself. And that's something that I look forward to doing. It's very important to me. But being here today is very significant for me because it's beyond support. I actually want to get more involved in what's going on in our community, and I think it's very important It's also significant when the pastor said we're trying to put the neighbor back in the hood. It's significant, especially being here in the church, because one of the biggest things with the church is communion. And when you use the word communion, you talk about community, it's a coming together. And I think it's very important that not just myself, but everyone here in the community comes together, because it's something that'll bring us closer, not only as family, as friends, but it also makes us stronger in a community. And I think what makes a community stronger is the leaders that are in the community. Without the leaders in the community, then they have no one to look up to, and most people, their visions get daunted and they feel down because they feel like they have no support. They have no direction for anyone to take them to. But when we have the pastor who has implemented a lot of things, has a strong vision, has been patient about a lot of things, I think it's very significant that we need more people like him. More people to not only just support, but to come out and to help. And that was the biggest thing for me with joining the Juneteenth committee, because a lot of people look at the Juneteenth committee as, oh, this is just a celebration of black freedom from slavery. No, it's bigger than that. It's beyond a freedom from slavery. It's an opportunity for us to share who we are as a race of people, and for people to understand who we are as a race of people. And I think that goes over a lot of people's head, especially when you talk about race matters here in America. So I think the biggest thing for me being here today is to be able to give my input and gain knowledge as well. And it's very significant for me because I've been back in Edna for 3 years after being released from federal prison, after doing a 9-year bid, and before that, I did a 15-year prison bid. So giving back to my community and turning my life around and showing the community that, hey, I was the type of person who prayed on the community, but now I am praising my community and I'm lifting my community because I have put my past behind me and have become a different person when it comes to making sure that I represent the ideals of what a community stands for.
Yeah, right there. Sir, man.
Let me first say good afternoon. I'm Nelson Linder. I want to thank the pastor for his invitation. I was really excited about getting here. I was born in Central Georgia in 1958. I came to Austin in 1980 to be in the military, the Army, did a 3-year stint. I finished at Houston University in 1984, Business and Industrial Relations. I joined a company called Mutual of Omaha, been a life insurance agent for 35 years. But in 2000, I joined the Austin NCP, and I became the branch president. And today, 21 years later, I'm still the president. And we are addressing every day all the challenges that face us as people. The good thing is we have a lot of experience. Pastor said knowledge, that's critical. So the things that we're facing are not new. We have to consult our experiences, what we've done the right way, what we've done the wrong way, bring all that together. But our challenges, the good news is, though, if you're committed and take knowledge and information, use it the right way, and make a commitment, we can solve all these problems. Not easy. The world is different today, but in our past, there are solutions to every problem. And I'm here to share the ideas that I've experienced and share with other people, but also how we address all the major problems of the day: police brutality, employment discrimination, all kinds of racism, housing discrimination, you name it, we've dealt with it. There are things there I want to share later that will help us engage these things and use best practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Pickens. Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Pickens, and okay. Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Pickens, and I'm living in Austin now. And I want to thank Minister Roberts for inviting me. Currently, I serve as a professor in criminal justice at Houston-Tillotson University. After working over 35 years in criminal justice, starting out with juveniles. And the shocking thing to me was how many teenage boys and girls were actually in a locked up facility, which I had never seen before. But this was in Newark, New Jersey. My background is, after high school, I went to college, graduated Montclair State University in New Jersey, and I joined the Air Force through ROTC, so I served in the United States Air Force for 5 years. During that time, I was able to obtain a master's degree in criminal justice, and I've worked in federal law enforcement as well as probation and parole, and I ended up retiring from working in Houston with the courts. And one of the things that struck me was the juvenile justice system. And if there's any light that I can shine on how to deal with preventing juveniles from engaging in things that would lead them to an incarcerated or a detained situation. That's one of the things that's really been something that I have a profound interest in, because each one of those boys and young ladies can be reached. It's just a matter of giving the opportunity and having the right people in the right place and having programs. People need forgiveness because people make mistakes, whether they're 15 or whether they're 35. But we would hope that the 35-year-old does not make the same mistakes that the 15-year-olds make. So that's something that's strong in my mind and heart to help avert juvenile delinquency, juvenile recidivism, and then entering from the juvenile system into the adult criminal justice system. So I teach the course, but one of the things I did at the detention center was I facilitated a group session with the boys. And it averted fights. It gave them something to think about when they did leave, because most of them do get juvenile probation unless they're violent offenders. So that made a difference, that there are some things you can do to change where you don't have to come back here. So it's just a matter of reaching them. And I've seen some make differences in their lives in terms of how they've decided to conduct themselves after being in the detention center. And it's just a matter of who knows when that spark is going to hit that make them really think about it, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. So that's one of the things I like to bring here today is some information about the juvenile justice system, the Texas juvenile justice system, and the consequences, how fatal they could be, and how devastating it could be, and how it could take years out of their lives. Because the people making decisions have philosophies that say, we're going to go by the rule of law, and we're going to apply it. But then many times they don't apply that same rule of law to other young guys who come in there who may be of a different hue. So we're going to talk about some of those programs that are in the community that can be availed and can avert being sent away to a secure facility. Now, I mean a place like Giddings or Brownwood, where there's actually lockup facility. So that's my focus today.
Let me do say I want to thank each and every one of you from coming from far and near to be here today to equip our community with knowledge. I want to thank you two men for your passion, as well as Shanna for the work that you guys have been doing in our community, a lot of which sometimes you're underappreciated and you're talked about for the work that you're trying to do. But I thank you for your steadfastness and your faithfulness to the objective in seeing our community go upward and forward. To begin, I want to begin with you three to give them some level of a context of what we're looking at in our community. I want to start with you, Derek. I call you Tubby. But can you share with us some of what you see in our community that bugs you, some of the things that you've experienced that is challenging you, not just, and so I want to be fair, what are some of the things that you see in our community that bugs you as it relates to self-inflicted wounds, but then also some of the challenges that you see that we're working against that we possibly, we shouldn't be.
That we should be facing.
That we shouldn't be facing. Can you share that with us?
Yes, that's pretty easy. I mean, it's real simple because everything comes from the heart and everything's going to be natural. Like I said earlier, I didn't understand this change until God put this in my heart. I didn't know anything about change until God put this in me. I still don't understand it, but he's still working through me through this change. Let me say that first. First of all, I grew up in this neighborhood all my life. I'm 45 years old, and I used to walk these streets as a little kid and see some of the things, you know, how we was treated just because of your last name or the family that you came from, or like it could be any. It was like some of the most heart troublesome moments that any child would want to endure coming up in a very small community, which we have here. But what I can always say is that Shiloh Church, Scruggs Church, and Faith Temple Church, Church of Christ, has always been in our community for all of us. I used to walk, like I said, I used to walk around and see different houses go down, people leave, they don't come back. You have different heirs to different properties that just don't care about it no more. And I left Edna for 15 years. I did, because I didn't want to be here. I said, no, that's not the life I wanted. But God brought me back home. So I said, well, what can I do to make it a better place? So I started taking the initiative on what my brother just said, on the disruption and the things that I contribute to in the community, and put myself on a platform to say, hey, if I could change, if I can make a difference to want to make a change, some of our younger youth can do it also. Would love to be an example for some of our younger youth to see me go through that change and be different. As you would see the community slowly go down, people leave, and they don't care. And that's where it's been, to where people don't care, because it don't affect them. They don't live here. It don't affect them. It don't affect their family. It don't affect their children. So why give it the interest? So I said, enough is enough. I'll put myself on this pedestal to say, hey, if I can take the initiative to change, to reach out to our youth and show them that there's still a chance, even of what you see in our community, there's still ones out here that want to see you get to your next level. So that's what I took. And it's been a lot of ridicule behind it. It really has. I didn't know how to talk at first. Someone told me, one of my biggest members of my committee, Morris Hopes, can't thank Morris enough, because he taught me to listen. He taught me to listen. He said, listen more than what you talk, brother. You'll gain more knowledge by listening. So that's what happened. That's what I did. We would go to these city council meetings, and we would let them know what's on our agenda and what we've done, what we're trying to do. But I would listen. We would give them our theory of what we did or what we're trying to do, and I would just sit and listen and let my actions take my response. We actually did another heavy cleanup to where I exposed my number, we put our names out at the city hall, and we targeted our elderly with heavy trash pickup. And we wanted maybe only 10 people on that list. We ended up with 22 people on that list. And we went to each and every one of their residents, and we picked up all of their heavy trash. Big thanks to the city. They did supply us with the roll-off dumpsters at the city barn. But it was on a Saturday that we participated in. They was calling us on a Friday to say, where y'all at? We're not getting the response that we wanted. We're not getting all the trash picked up that we needed. Until on Saturday, when we joined, they had the greatest outpour. Just from people on a list where we stopped by all their residents and picked up their trash. So that's the difference that I'm trying to make. We're targeting our youth and our elderly, and we're trying to clean up and beautify our community. That's the main basic focus of the changes that I'm needing to see in our community.
So let me ask you this, question to both of you to be more specific. I had two parents growing up here in this community. I had the best of both worlds. I lived in Vanderbilt, which was a mostly Caucasian community. We were only blacks really in the school district, myself, my sister, Stacy and Stephanie, in industrial, where I was really the only black in my class, really. But then I would come to Edna, play at the project at Miss Estelle Bourne's house, and I was very aware early on that the way I grew up, people at the church didn't grow up the same way. So my parents would take in children Samson, Samika, Sammy Lee, all them, they would go on vacations with us. My father and mother prided themselves on being parents to children that didn't have both parents in the homes. However, the way I explain living in Edna is like a bowl. That there are so many children that have the potential, they get up into high school and they get to be a senior and it looks like they're gonna make it out of the bowl and they slide right back in. And so even with me having both parents in the home and my father being a pastor and growing up in the fear and admonition of God, it was still a challenge to break away from an Edna mindset. Another thing I'll say is here recently, not too long ago, we took children to Dallas, Texas. And when we went to Dallas to take them to the high school championship games, we had children that had never been out of Edna before. And for them, for the very first time to go out of town, we saw how their faces lit up. Only thing we did was just go to a football game at the Dallas Cowboy football stadium. But for those kids to see that stadium and looking and oohing and ahhing, they had never seen anything like that. Now, I would take that for granted because my parents always took us on vacations. We went all around the place. And so I have always grown up with this consciousness and this awareness that everybody is not brought up with the same plight. The most disheartening thing for me, as you have already alluded to the fact, I had a man who claims to be a friend of mine since I've been 13 years old. I'm just a straightforward person, just a straight shooter. And supposed to be kin to me, will share to me, why am I in Edna trying to do great and grand things? And I'm wondering now, you're not doing nothing to try to help the community, but because I'm trying to do something, you ridicule me for it. And I've learned in playing football, if you're not on the field, you're not gonna get hit or you're not gonna get hurt until you get on the field. They don't hit people that's on the sideline. Another thing is I was also ridiculed before because we took our children to the NASA Space Museum. Well, I was asked, why am I trying to do great and grand things again? Well, because I understand that in the job market today, you have to have and push children towards STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those type of jobs. So to expose our children to NASA Space Museum and go and have fun and get to see that there's things beyond was a great deal to me. So I give that context to ask you this question. I know both of you have had some challenges in the past, as well as the ridicule of trying to do on this Juneteenth. I've heard a whole lot of stuff that you guys have been through on this Juneteenth committee. So my question to you guys is, can you practically talk about, and we'll get to our speakers, but can you practically talk about the challenge it was growing up in Edna and now the real challenge that you have by even our own people? Only even leaders in our community who are supposed to be quote unquote statesmen. Now a statesman is a person who has a heart for the community and not self-exaltation. And so we've had challenges, as I've experienced some of the same things you guys have experienced. Can you share with us the challenge, number one, of growing up in Edna, and then also the challenges that you've had since you made this transformation and trying to bring about change?
Okay,
so we give them
first
a
of
context.
all, that was
thing.
the challenge.
And you have a family member that got a 99-year sentence
There you go.
and died in jail for a non-violent crime, and I want you to speak about it.
There you go, right there. It starts right there, coming from, like I said, coming from where you was pinpointed, because that's who your family members was. Like Pastor said, I had an auntie that gave 99 years in prison, and she died at the age of 62, 63 years old. I think she served 26 years in prison, and she died in prison.
What was she arrested for, convicted for?
It was an aggravated assault, but it was under the old law. Now, legislation passed a new law in 95, I think it was. She got her time in 94. I was a junior in high school. I never saw my auntie again. And that took me to a whirlwind. Like you said, you get those kids that go up, that they got the potential to go up, and they come back down. I was one. I had the potential to go to school, but I didn't. That brought me back down, and that led me straight. It did. And it comes with that challenge of when you go through life and then you come back and try to make a change and do something different. With me, with this neighborhood cleanup I'm trying to do, I've been slandered at least 3 times already by one of the most prominent people in our community that should not, and he's our city councilman for District 2. I went through a situation with this guy on Friday by trying to get the knowledge that we need to understand for our community. So if we're not getting that knowledge from that's just our pastor here. He gives us the knowledge for what the word says, but we can't get the knowledge from our public city officials on which way the water flows, what are we doing to better our community, what's going on with our community. If we're not getting these answers from our leaders, what do we do? So that's where you get that. You get kicked down. Like, my efforts are endless because I feel like I'm doing this for nothing. I got to the point to I just wanted to stop on Friday. After he exposed me on Friday, I wanted to quit. But I prayed on it for 2 solid days. I said, Lord, I know this is for you to help me to get through, to clean up our community. So please give me the strength to continue to go. And that's where it comes from. We're gonna get that. People who talk down on you because of who you were or where you come from and not gonna see that change in you. So that's where it comes from. I have to be persistent with that change. And that's what I'm doing.
What was the challenge growing up here? And what led you to that life, but now led you back to your productive citizen?
Well, for me, it wasn't more so challenging here because I grew up in different places. I wasn't just here in Edna. I was back in San Antonio. I was back in West Texas. And to give you some insight as far as in what led to some of the challenges so that you would have an understanding about my stories. I went to prison at 16 years old. I was charged with organized crime to commit murder, and I got certified as an adult at 16. And I was given a 30-year sentence. And ultimately, what led up to, what were some of those challenges that led up to my life ultimately taking a turn was my environment. As you know, my grandfather, Reverend Young, was the pastor of Schools from the United Methodist Church here in Edna. And so I had a very profound background as a child of a pastor, being raised not only by my mother, but also by my grandfather, my grandparents. And so I had a very good understanding of right and wrong. And I was growing up younger, and Derek and I, we've been close friends since we were grade school. It really wasn't so much as the challenges until I moved away from here. And I think one of the biggest things with me was I got involved with gang activity. And that's why when Mr. Pickens spoke about the juvenile justice system, it was very key for me because I was in the juvenile justice system. I know it hands down, in and out. Not only having going through the court system, but ultimately getting sentenced to prison and going through the adult system, being a juvenile per se at 16, 17 years old, going into a prison. And you're talking about other people who have murdered, rapists, and all kinds of backgrounds dealing with the criminal activity. And I was given a 30-year sentence, and ultimately I was dealt a bad hand at the hands of a lawyer because I had a white lawyer who refused to fight for me because he didn't want to take my situation to court because he didn't want to upset the judges and make the court system lose any money. And that was the biggest thing with not having any money and parents can't afford a lawyer, then I had to take it how it came. But ultimately, I accepted that because I took someone's life. So you look at God having a bigger hand in that situation that, hey, I owe something back, not to myself, but also to the family of the individual that I killed. And I did my time, and I came out, and ultimately, I had a different ideology on what life was like because I hadn't been out here in society. And next thing you know, I'm selling drugs. And I ended up catching a federal prison bid in 2010 for 519 grams of crack cocaine and a kilo of cocaine. I was looking at a 30-plus year sentence, upwards to a life sentence, but ultimately, because Barack Obama changed the crack ratio, I was able to get a mandatory 10-year sentence, and I ended up doing about 8 years and some change because I went through the residential drug abuse program, and I got a year off my sentence for going through that program. And ultimately in that program, I was a mentor in that program, and I came out of that program, and here I am today, 3 years plus free out of prison. And you look at my life having done a total of 24 years in prison and see where I am now, you know, to me, that's a story within itself to be applauded. And not tooting my own horn, but a lot of people don't get to say, hey, you know what, I did 24 years in prison and look at my life. I work every day, honestly, and I haven't went back into my old life, you know, with the drugs and running the streets. And I try to talk to the youth, and that's one of the biggest things. When I see kids here walking down the street, I don't care who kids they are.
Yes.
I try to speak to them and pull them over and talk to them about gang activity. I talk to them about packing guns, about the violence, you know, because they don't want to lose their lives. Because ultimately, going into prison, you know, you're not the only one that suffers. Your family suffers. You know, my mother, she suffered because not only did she lose myself, at the time, she lost my brother as well. And so she had three other children in the home that she had to take care of. And it got hard on her. And it wasn't until I got out of prison and actually found out how hard it was for her to deal with that. And I think that's the biggest thing that's challenging for the kids is the parents. Most of the parents, when you look, not just here in Edna, but the parents are friends of their children rather than parents. And that's the biggest thing. When you don't have the right role model or the correct parenting inside the home, you fail these children. But it's a community, because back then, the way I came up, the community, it was a village raised itself. The village raised itself. It doesn't matter if Miss McGrew caught me swearing down the street. If she got on my behind when I got home, Annie Mae Young and Reverend Billy C. Young, I'm gonna get it again. Then I got to go home and now Elaine's gonna get it. So it didn't really matter. If Miss Callis told me up down the street, then that's what it was. It didn't matter. And I think that's the most important thing here is when you see that someone said, oh, I don't need you talking to my kids. These my kids. Well, your kids are in the middle of the street for one. You know, they don't want to get out in the middle of the street. Cars are coming, if someone hits them, hurts them, then, you know, you feel in some type of way. So I think the biggest thing is being with the understanding that when somebody positive comes along to talk to whoever's child it may be, that is openly accepted, because the parents are teaching them that, hey, adults are to be respected. There are authoritative figures. It doesn't matter if they're your parents or not, but there's someone who, and that's me. I'm someone who cares about the juvenile because I know how it is in the juvenile system. I've seen it. You know, just the other day I watched the story of the first kid who's ever received a life sentence. When they first decided to give children a life sentence, how do you give a 13-year-old, matter of fact, this kid, he was 11. How do you give an 11-year-old child a life sentence in prison? And then you expect for him to be able to not come out as an animal, not come out as a monster if he ever makes it out. And I think that was the biggest thing for me was normalizing myself coming back to society, because inside of prison, you know, you got gang activity, you got a lot of illegal stuff going on, and I became a monster in prison. I was, you know, and by me being angry at how much time I had, that my life was taken away, because before I went to prison, I had an opportunity to go to Miami, Florida, Coral Gables for ROTC. When my mom received all my stuff, it broke her down. She cried. And, you know, when I talked to her on the phone and she told me that, it was the most, you know, hurtful thing. And so I think the biggest issue for me, what Mr. Pickens was speaking about, is as far as the juvenile justice system, the criminal justice system, because it doesn't help us. The criminal justice system when you talk about, especially the federal system, it was pushed in by Bill Clinton, who actually formulated these draconian sentences, and who put into place where they took away parole from federal prison and actually made where you have to do 85% of your time. And so now you have, you know, and you go back and people applaud Bill Clinton this, Bill Clinton that. Oh, he was the first black president. No, he wasn't. He was a white president who didn't care about black people. And that's a fact, and I'm just straightforward. And you still have to this day within the federal system these sentences that are disparate, that do not help us. And they keep us in the prison system. And the prison system, that's why they privatized it. That's something else that needs to be shared. They privatized the prison system during the political area so that they can make money off the stock market with the private prisons, because if they did the war on drugs, which they targeted black people with these draconian sentences due because they felt like crack cocaine was the substance or drug of choice for us to sell, it alluded to, hey, we can fill them in with prisons, give them a bunch of time, we can keep them there. Now they can't procreate, they can't have families, they're taken away from their neighborhoods. So you're talking about a system that can go on and on. I can get so deep about it, but I don't want to take up any more of the time. But you know, those are the things that we deal with when we talk about, especially the federal criminal justice system, how those sentences disparate, how they affect us.
Man, that's a blessing.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your
Yes.
story. Can I get you guys to respond? What resources, what solutions can you provide based on your expertise regarding some of the challenges that we spoke about?
Okay, let me talk about the,
If you'll come up here, so they can hear you in the live stream.
okay, let me talk about the juvenile justice system and the criminal justice system. They are not designed in their formation to help. They are designed to punish. And you have to have an advocate to state your case. That is where we fall short, because the cost of a defense attorney, to hire an investigator to pursue the avenues that you saying need to be pursued that could put you in a position where you may receive less punishment. Very, very expensive. I have to be very honest with you. And that is the difficulty that faces poor people when they come into the juvenile justice system and the criminal justice system. And these places have personnel. These are people. But they get into a mindset of a routine. And when you start talking about doing something out of the routine or the revolving door, there's not a concern to make that change. One of the things that when I worked at the juvenile Newark, New Jersey, where you're a juvenile until your day before your 18th birthday, so they had another whole year to be a juvenile as opposed to children in Texas. So I started having the group and letting them know, look, this is what you're facing. Don't go downstairs and talk to the social worker, let them give you a soda and a candy bar and let you call your girlfriend. Call your lawyer, find out what's going on. Quick story, we had two guys in there, dark-skinned African-American boys, 5'3" and 5'5". Once they called their lawyer and got information about what the prosecutor was going to use against them for their case, eyewitnesses said there were two very light-skinned black men who did this murder. But they didn't know that beforehand. Once they got that information, it helped them with their case. So they did get sentenced to 3 years. They accepted a plea bargain deal, but they waived their case up to adult court. And because of that discovery information, they were able to say, hey, how could it be these two? The descriptions don't match. But had they not been proactive, okay, it would have really sent them down the road. It is a challenge. It is, that's why I like to go on the preventive side. Do everything you can for juveniles so they'd never get into handcuffs. Okay, work in the school system, provide a counseling program. I talked with Mr. Roberts, he talked about the counseling program in terms of juvenile delinquency prevention. And juvenile delinquency prevention, a grant through the Federal Department of Justice Juvenile Delinquency Prevention Program. How if you get someone to write a grant, you can have established at this church a counseling program dealing with the juveniles who are on juvenile probation, and also those who come back from secure facilities, okay? And this way, they can come to the church and get counseling and get some advocate for them to say, hey, this is what you need to do, and then stay out of this or get out of this situation. Unfortunately, okay, in your situation, What you faced was people who knew the law, people who were versed in prosecuting, and you did not have an adequate advocate for you to pursue something different in terms of an outcome. But I like to focus on what can we do with juveniles, teenagers, okay, juvenile is that legal term. What can we do with teenagers and 7th, 8th graders before they get to really being 15, 16, to let them know of the consequences of that type of behavior. And sometimes it takes drilling it. You know, we all know fire is hot, but we have an understanding of fire's hotness once we get burnt. So what I try to stress to them is, listen, you're dealing with something that's going to be devastating to your whole life, and you need to think of the consequences before you do an action. Now tell me what you think about that, because I want them to talk to me so I can see where their head is at and what they're thinking about. So in this way, if you can get a captive audience with them to discuss things in your life as an example can say to them, don't be like me. And if I didn't care, if I didn't love you, I would not be talking to you about this. I go on my merry way, work, make my money, you know, I could hibernate at home or do whatever I'm gonna do, but never go into that system again and not care about anybody coming up after me, right? I care because I lost a lot of my good friends because they went that way, okay? They had freedom to stay out later at night. I didn't have that freedom, okay? I had to be home. Some of my friends told me on a Friday, listen, man, don't go home when you want to. And I said, man, you know my father, ain't no way I could walk in there 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, he's 6'5", 280, and you think I'm going, it's Friday night, midnight, Saturday, it's 10 o'clock. I got to be. So one of my friends said, hey, I'm gonna go ahead with these guys. I said, listen, man, you need to go home. You need to go with those guys. He went with them. They went to a white area. They did some robberies. They came back. I saw this guy the next day. He said, man, you know, I did all that. And I did all that running from way up there to get back here. And you know how we divided the money? I got 35 cents. I said, you could have asked your mother for that. You did all of that, and you got 30. I said, let's stay away from them guys. So about a week later, those guys did the same thing, and then they were gone. They were gone for like 8 months. So which covered the end of this school year on into the next, over the summer into the next school year. But I can pinpoint those 4 or 5 guys, that's been their life. Up to in their 40s and 50s. So that's what I'm talking about, the devastating effects of getting into it and then staying in it. I applaud any person, male, female, that comes out of the prison system and does something positive with their life because they have made a dedication to a cause. And the cause can be something as simple, I ain't going back. The cause could be, I'm gonna get a better education. And I don't care if I have to work 2 jobs and then go to school, okay? And we have to get that story across, because giving numbers and statistics and all that, that's great. The majority of the people dealing in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department system are African Americans, 41%. 41%. Okay? I believe that there are not enough alternatives to these juvenile judges of things you can do without sending this young man or this young lady away from their family, away from their neighborhood, away from their relatives, to something that's unfamiliar. Okay, juvenile justice system in Texas has halfway houses. There's only one for young girls, and that's in Fort Worth, Texas, and they only can house 24. So there's a need. Someone can start a residential facility, get grant money, and then petition the court that, hey, send them over here. They can be housed over here for a year. They can go to school right back here. We'll monitor them and watch them. This is better than going over there. That's a solution that we can deal with in terms of community people can do that.
Okay,
you know, and that would help out. When I was down in South Texas, I worked at a Texas Youth Commission halfway house, 24 boys. And I said, okay, they're gonna wake up, have breakfast, go over there, and we have some in the GED program. We have some that have a GED already, we're gonna put them to work. Then those who are working, instead of keeping them 6 months, we'll keep them 5 months. That's your incentive. Go to work, we're gonna take you, we're gonna bring you lunch, we're gonna go come get you and bring you back. So my push was to get them jobs. My push was to, as well as have the counseling. We had the group counseling, and and another guy had gotten where we were formulated with the city. You know, they had a city basketball league, so we had a team in that league. So they were doing some things with other children or other teenagers that were not in the juvenile justice system. And we had some even going to community college. One guy, he just wanted to work on automobiles. He took one course at a community college, and then he got a job changing oil at Jiffy Lube. The best thing for him. He was so excited to do that because that's what his passion was. And you feed into that. But there are alternatives to incarcerations that I think we need to avail ourselves of. And that is one of the things, you know, we develop our own group home. And you can get monies from the state, monies from the city, as well as monies from the federal government to facilitate having the house that will pay for the house, pay for the salaries. So in this way, we can house our kids who get into trouble right here in the community and say, hey, listen, you can go to the school right here and get the same education, but you cannot go over there and mess up, because if you do, they're not gonna send you back here to this house, they're gonna send you away. So you have something hanging over your head that's going to hopefully cause you to make a change in how you're doing things. And some of the people I know that have been in and out, when they make that change, when they make that determination, I'm not going back. I'm gonna do something different, okay? Because I don't want somebody telling me what to do, when to do it, how to go, and everything else. And right now with violent juveniles, they're being more punitive, more punishment. But when young people don't understand that and don't realize that it could happen to them, you're 16 years old, your case can be waived up and you can be put in adult court and you'll receive adult punishment. They don't understand the significance of that. And that's one of the things that I really drill on and I really push and I put a focus on in my classes, as well as when I was working with juveniles. You don't understand the consequences of what you're doing, what could happen here to the rest of your life. And we would get real serious. We'd sit in a circle, you know. I'd buy them a soda and a bag of potato chips, but we're gonna talk. And I don't care what's said, you keep your seat, because we're gonna deal with it from here. And we're not gonna get emotional, we're not gonna call each other names. We're gonna talk, and I'm gonna share with you what I know, and I wanna know what you think. If you wanna go down that road, you're making a decision. If you decide not to go down that road, you're making an even better decision for yourself in your life. So I've been invested because I've seen some good friends of mine go that way. I've seen my other friends of mine go that way. You know, I had some direction, I had some guidance that I listened to. And I'm no different than these guys that went that way. But I had some guidance that I decided to listen to them and say, hey, okay, if I do that, if I ride in that stolen car, I know where that's gonna lead me. Listen, man, I'll catch up with you guys later. They drove a block and made a right turn, and there was 5 police cars there. Because I decided not to get in that car, I went over there and I was like, man, go by my mama's house, go tell my mama. As I went running and did that. But I thought about it. If I had gotten in that vehicle 1 block, my life would have really, my whole world would have been different. So that's why we have to talk to the youth, even when they don't want to hear what we have to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I want to talk about, Pastor, first of all, sociology, how we used to be, how we develop our young people, then the political component you mentioned. But I want to go beyond. These are symptoms of much larger problems. Let me tell you why I'm saying that. A fellow named Kwanzaa Kanjufa wrote a book that talked about the black community in 1950.
Yes, sir.
He identified three things as being influences: the family, the church, and school. So we were modeling behavior to our young people in a community environment that we controlled. We had checks and balances. Over a period of time, by the early 90s, mid-80s, he did another study, University of Michigan. The biggest influence on our kids themselves was peers, music, then family. The church was way down the list, and so was the school system. So our whole community flip-flopped based on just societal changes and community. We saw the impact of what we call integration. A fellow named Eugene Robinson, who's a highly coveted writer, said he called it disintegration. So all these factors out there paved the way for a lot of things to occur. The prison system initially was about rehab. What changed that? Look at the prison system in the 1960s, the low population. So what changed that? Well, a fellow named Ronald Reagan and a guy named Newt Gingrich came up with the war on drugs, where crack cocaine came out of nowhere in the black communities. It became available, people were using it, they became addicted, people were selling it. Then came these mandatory sentences that came out of that whole process, reinforced by people like Clinton and Joe Biden. That whole thing took off, and so what happened is these corporations began to privatize institutions. It became a money issue. That's where the private systems came from. But it's very important to understand, number one, that the government changed politically. They had a certain mentality. It was very anti-black. And number two, our community was weakened by what was happening to us in this nation. If you don't, anybody that in a community without checks and balances is going to fall apart. And the final thing is economics. You know, everywhere I go in this country, I talk to black communities, you see inequities in our community. We pay the same tax rate in Edna we pay in Austin for the most part, but yet black people don't get the proper money in our communities, have lack of jobs, lack of infrastructure. Those things have consequences. So you got the social component, you got the political component, the folks who are against us for all kinds of reasons, and economics. If you don't have a viable economic community where you can employ people, live a certain lifestyle, guess what? You are vulnerable. So we are vulnerable. So the NACP started fighting these policies in the 80s and 90s. Back then, nobody was listening. Then all of a sudden, even before Barack Obama, they began to talk about how do we limit these sentences because they have a disparate impact on black people. Back then, we were fighting people, and all of a sudden, they began to listen. So now in many cities around this country, we got folks in office, DAs, that all of a sudden will talk about marijuana and throw things out. They'll tell the cops, don't bring these kids in for that kind of stuff. So we're seeing these changes as we become involved and educated about what's going on. So the things we go through, any normal population will have similar problems. If we have no social structure, no economic structure, then with the model behavior, guess what? People fall apart. When we see white communities, you don't see that. So when there is a mistake, they have the ability to accommodate what you did, and oftentimes they'll look the other way. So we don't have a threshold here socially to drive our kids, influence our kids, because basically right now, when a child gets in trouble, I have a 20-year-old son. I can tell you right now, you know, because of what I do, he thinks it's hard, he's hanging out with his peers. And I can talk all night, but you got to tap into his influences. Now, some kids, over a period of time you mentioned, will grow and evolve. But the factors out there right now are much more powerful than we are. That's why the idea of faith becomes so important. Because, see, our people have always had a basis for dealing with our challenges. But those things all go together. Studies show right now a lot of our young people, this generation, they're going away from their history, their religious institutions. They're going away from that. They're out here in a world where they're living with things that's not even spirituality. You can do what you want to do what you want to do. Not really. There are consequences to everything. So I can tell you, me being in Georgia, my dad was a minister. My great-great-grandfather was a minister. So I had a checks and balances system. I had 13 people in my family. I had 7 sisters and 6 brothers. Right? We were intergenerational. I got a sister right now that's the bottom of the middle, and she's 84. got one that's 82, got one that's 80, got one that's 78, and they're all alive. So the structure, even in Baltimore, it's a tough place, is still there. So we learn through our continuity and our culture. So we've been disconnected. So those things got to be plugged in again when the light comes on, where we know who we are and what our responsibilities are. I'm a typical, hey, when I was 18 years old, a place called Fort Stewart, Georgia, a good friend of mine was from Louisville, Kentucky. One weekend he was going home. He had an old 69 Pontiac, nice car. We were good buddies. He was married. I wasn't. So he was going home to Louisville that weekend, and I said, hey, man, drop me off at the bus station. So we get in the car and run into the gate, the main gate where the police always sit. And they've got a roadblock. And they got dogs on the street. This is like 78. They're going to check every car. So I say, hey, man, no problem, we're good. Then he says, Nelson, he says, I got marijuana in the car, in the trunk. I'm like, are you serious, man? When I was cool, right? So here's where faith in God comes in. Because I didn't have an issue with marijuana. I just didn't need it because of where I came from. But the guys I was around, they smoked it. Like, hey, man, I don't need that, frankly. But anyway, so they come around to our car. I'm sweating because how am I going to tell my mom what how am I going to explain this, right? So the German Shepherd, dog comes around, looks at me, goes around to the trunk, they open it up. He just wagged his tail and walked away. Thank you, so you guys move on. I said, man, don't you never do this again. Now, think what would happen at that period of time had I been in that car and got arrested. Article 15, it could have ruined my whole life. So the little things around you sometimes, if you're plugged into the right sources, God gives you a second chance, right? So see, all those things come into our community. I mentioned the sociology. I mentioned the racist criminal justice system. I said every day, well, a lot of black kids come to my office, they have no money, and I can call people and talk to them and minimize things. But all these things play together because people are going to make mistakes. But we want to make sure we limit those mistakes because when you make them, it can go either way because everybody ain't sensitive. In Austin right now, we got a new DA named Jose Garza. He's got a whole nother program than what the previous person had. So you tell me this, there's one law, but yet based on different interpretation, people can do certain things. That itself is a problem. The law should be enforced equally across the board to everybody. We got a judge in Austin that created a drug court for young people. He could put them in a program and minimize criminal justice exposure. So back to the pastor's original comment about knowledge. You see, that is such a powerful thing because I don't give myself any special credit, but my mother and father talked about the benefits of doing the right thing, the benefits of knowing who you are and what you're here doing on this planet. So I got that at an early age. And I've been in situations sometimes where if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be here. So you're all living for a bigger purpose. What we're trying to do is make the society enforce what we call equal protection of the law. It should be in Edna, Austin, everywhere. There's one law. And the fact that black people are a disparity or a discrepancy is a major problem. So for my job, we won a lot of these battles. We want to make sure that we take those draconian racist laws out of the Constitution and make sure there's one law and everybody's treated the same. So we're gonna attack this prison system. We've already attacked it. We have some impact there. The next stage is back to our community, the neighbor back in hood. Our young people need to have jobs that pay more than the minimum wage where they can have a decent life. We need schools where our kids can have a quality education. And I'm gonna close on this note. Back in, I think, 2005, Texas A&M did a study about problems in our school system. You always hear about black kids being here and being there, so they did a study. They found out when it came to black kids going to the office and being kicked out of school, everything that happened to our black kids was discretionary. White kids were doing the same thing, and it was discretionary. They weren't being kicked out of school. So something discretionary, how in the heck is it you're giving to all black people? We had to challenge that. Now they're doing better jobs, but all these things are still out there. So all these things connect together. So through understanding who we are, and what we should be doing, my job is to combat this stuff. Also, I'm a business person. I try to hire black kids. We invest money in institutions so you can have vacations and do things. And we can model a certain kind of behavior. But we got to come to terms with ourselves as adults and realize that, look, it's a lot of stuff out there. And me, frankly, knowing who we are, you're not going to win these major battles without having a certain kind of faith that there's something bigger than you. And when you do good things and great things to your own people, you're building up credit. And I tell young people, do something good in your neighborhood. Encourage somebody. We ain't in competition, Pastor, with nobody. And a final thought. I go to a lot of town halls. I was at one yesterday, Eastern Toasting, by a group called Awesome Black Coalition. These are young people. And every time I go, somebody stands up and says something negative about nothing. There are a lot of folks who let them talk crazy. I'm not the kind of guy. I'm so, okay, what's your point? What do you really want to say? We're here to help people. And you're telling us there's nothing we can do. Well, we've done a whole lot already. So what is your issue? I see it all the time. We let it go on like it's not normal. If you ain't got anything good to say, and it's not factual, you're not going to do it in my presence. Whether it be on talk radio, church, whatever. We have to address that. Because what happened is there are folks who are trying to do good work. They walk in and just tear you apart. Spirit of the devil is what I call it. So I'm saying, look, we're trying to make a difference we can. We're going through a social cycle in this country that we've been through before in many ways. These things go in cycles. But if we do the right thing, we're going to get the right results. It takes sacrifice. It takes repentance. It takes all kinds of things. Pastor, I'm very confident once we get through this cycle, we're going to be okay. But it's going to require that we humble ourselves, remember who we are, why we're here, and that these laws that we're fighting can be changed. But you got to make sure you be a great human being. We're not perfect, but when you do the right thing, the laws are in your favor. I want to stop there.
Let me ask you a question.
I'd like to share something.
I'm going to go back to you guys, if you don't mind.
Just for 1 minute.
Okay, go ahead.
Pass these around. Take one yourself and pass it around. These are a little book that I got. I wanted to bring it down here and share with everybody. It's a short book on You Have the Right, a constitutional guide to policing the police. And one of the main things in this book, it's a little, what is it, maybe 125 pages. It's a quick read, and it's a good read. It's a factual read, and it can help. You know it, share it with somebody else once you read it, and because when people know their rights, they know the limitations of what a police officer can do when you, and what they cannot do when you have a police stop, whether it's in a vehicle or whether it's on the side of the street you're walking. But this, I found it to be the most powerful packed thing in a small package that is impactful, because there are things in here that will save people from going through or having a difficulty. You're not going to win with police on the street. I'm not going to win with police on the street, okay? So, once I know my rights, guy stopped me for speeding, showed him everything. Step out the car. Yes, sir. Killed him with sir, okay? And then he said, you don't mind if I look in your trunk? I said, no, I don't. But what's your probable cause? What's your legal reason for one? You know, when I said probable cause, he knew from his police training that that meant he had to have a reason, a factual reason that led him to believe there was something illegal in my trunk. What did I do? What did you smell in the car when you approached the car? What's your probable cause? He said, are you a lawyer? I said, no, but I've had some training. I read this book. This is my legal training. It's written by Laura Coates. She's a CNN analyst. She's a former federal prosecutor, which means she's an attorney. I've had some legal training. That's all I told him. And then I said, you know, I don't mind if you can tell me that. And he said, wait right here. He didn't have probable cause, so he never looked in my trunk. My fear on the side of the road was that if he looked in the trunk and he got my attention diverted, and the other officer threw something in there, guess who would be looking at a drug charge and two decorated, uniformed officers coming into court to testify against him? So that's why I wanted to pass this out, to give this to everybody here. take your time, read this. I think it'll be great for
I want Pastor to finish, but I'm going to address that and give you a very different point of view. But go ahead, Pastor. You were going to speak.
Go ahead.
Look, NACP's been writing books about your rights for about 30 years. One called the 411. Here's a problem based on data. We deal with data in actual cases. In Austin, we started doing use of force policies 20 years ago. We've done 3 federal investigations. We rewrote what cops can do. But here's the problem. You can know all of that, but in the street, see, our record shows, number one, that's not happening to white people. That's the first problem. We make it as simple as possible. You have to enforce the law equally. You ain't got to be a constitutional scholar on the street. The problem is with the cops. When you approach anybody, especially black people, it is your responsibility to treat that person with dignity. It starts right there. Whether you know zero or what about the Constitution, the bottom line is, look at Minneapolis, for example. You got cops that are killing people, doing things, being on the force for 10 years, because they were never held accountable by either their superiors or the Department of Justice. When they finally convicted Sharpton, FBI came and said, wait a minute, man, this is insane. We're going to investigate your apartment and shut it down. We did the same thing in Austin. I'm just being clear, okay? Because we use the books all the time. But these folks you're talking to who are killing black folks in cars because they're young kids who's not as composed as we are, that stuff is out of line. It's on them. You don't have to be a good person to get the constitutional protection. It is their job as peace officers to make sure when they approach you, they don't violate your rights. See, we got to be real clear about that. I know too many cases where, I'll give you one just example. Kid named Jesse Owens in 2003, 19 years old. The kid took a friend's car, was riding around the city one night, didn't steal the car, just took it. All of a sudden, somebody said, well, he stole a car. The cops stopped him on the corner of Tillery Street and MLK in 2003. He stopped the kid pulled over. He said, well, is the car stolen? He said, no. He said, well, where are you going? What are you doing? The kid said, I'm just taking a ride, man. So he reached in the kid's car and spooked the kid. He's 19 years old. Should not be doing that. He reached in the car. He claimed to reach for something. He said he saw a gun. It was a cell phone. He shot that kid 5 times. Now, this guy violated 5 policies, and we got him. So here's my point. The solution is with the cops. We know that now. That's why all over the country, people like David Sharp and here in Austin, you see some cases recently. People like Scott Glasgow and what's the recent guy that killed his kid? I'm thinking in a moment. We're not holding these cops accountable, saying, look, on the traffic stops, you have the right to do it the right way with everybody. You ain't reaching these white kids, killing them. That is a federal violation. So what we're saying is, if you're out in your car on the street, brother, you're not breaking the law, they should leave you alone. If they're going to stop you, you ain't got to be a scholar. That comes in the courtroom.
Excuse me, not to cut you off, but over here in this community,
Yeah.
if you have a background and they know who you are, they're going to target you every time
talk about that.
just because they know who you are.
Let's talk about that. In Austin, we got a lot of cases like that. We intervene, and guess what? We see a decrease in racial profiling and unlawful stops. But what I'm saying is, I want you to know what your rights are, but at the same time, the cops have to know what the Constitution says. The stuff that they're doing in places like Austin, Mike Reynolds' case, shooting a guy with his hands up outside of his car, we had already banned those kind of shootings. Now they're being held accountable. Now they're being indicted and they're being prosecuted. They have a responsibility to treat everybody right on the street. And you know what? If they do these traffic stops right, our kids don't get shot and killed. I'm not saying you should do certain things, but the responsibility is on peace officers.
Right. I understand.
We got one law.
Let me transition real quick to bring it to Edna, all right, to our community. One of my most frustrating things to come back and pastor my home church where I grew up is getting to know people I thought I knew and coming home and not having respect and not knowing my track record, that what I'm doing is not something that I just started doing here. This ain't the first panel you've been on with me. I had another one called The Black Man is Missing after reading Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. I get tired of studying and reading books like by James Cone, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where he goes back into the lynching era and how whites could go and worship a Jesus who was lynched by the Roman government, but then right after church that evening go and lynch a black who didn't do nothing wrong, and then take pictures by their testicles and then send them as postcards, right?
Yes, sir.
And people would sit out and watch this. I get tired of reading books like Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited, right? And so at some point you get tired of being in school and you want to do something about what you know. And so when people can't visualize what you're trying to build, they criticize it because they don't have the knowledge that you have. They're not seeing life like you're seeing it. And when you've left Edna and I'm driving through here and I see Shiner, I see Luland, I see Lockhart, their communities when I'm driving through coming down here don't look like ours. And when you live here every day, you become desensitized to it. I didn't know where I lived until I moved off to near Chicago and went to different places. And when I drive here and I see what we live in, it bothers me and I want to do something about it. But the same people who you're trying to help, they're the ones trying to cut your legs out from under you. You think you all that, but it's not that. There's so much more that many of us could be doing that I could spend my energy, I could be putting it into my business, right? And so what happens is we get cut down. And one of the things that we do is, in my opinion, we focus on the oppressor too much. And so we're in love with being the victim because it's a challenge to be a victor. Because that puts responsibility on you. And so with that being said, I did some statistics, and I want to focus on us, not the other community, because I believe we have a whole lot of self-inflicted wounds that we're not willing to address. And it's so easy to say, well, the white man is holding me down. I was never able to use that as a cop-out or an excuse. I grew up in Vanderbilt, Texas. My 5th grade teacher told me that I was a brown cow one day at recess. I was kind of a challenging kid. But more so, whenever your children sometimes tell you that the teacher's mistreating them, sometimes it's true.
Yes, it is.
It was true. And she told me at recess one day, she called me a brown cow. Now, Sheila Roberts came up there the next day with her nightgown on with them fuzzes all on it, all over her head. but she called me a brown cow. She told me I will never be anything, never make it to college. I wish I could talk to her now because I'll tell her my story. But here is the thing. I want to look at some of our self-inflicted wounds, and we have a whole lot of them in Edna. When I grew up here, there were people that didn't get paid to work with youth, but they were faithful working with us. Right now, even when I was at a youth pastor at a 4,000, 5,000 member church, it was very, very difficult to find men that'll work with young people. I can't find no men here in Edna that will work with young people. To be an example, if I give my son a picture of Bugs Bunny and ask him to draw it, and then take it away from him and ask him to draw another one, which picture do you think is going to look more like Bugs Bunny? The one that was in front of him when he drew it. There's a whole lot of us as men, we're trying to replicate the picture of a man in the home or in the community when we've never really seen a real one before. And so if we would raise our children as a village, as you said, like when I was growing up, there's so much more we could do, but we have people today that don't care. And when I look at Edna, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I just am a straightforward person and just say things like they are. I'm not always politically correct, but I mean well. It's like people are sleepwalking. When I ride through here and see men who won't engage in the community, people who still to this day, I haven't had one member to come to me and tell me they had something at their yard that needs to be moved out. And I drive through and see that all of our trees are overgrown around here. But nobody is in the city is willing and giving us all the resources as we possibly can. Even gonna dump our trash for free, but people will not accept these things. We will not engage in the voting process, but then we want to sit up and we want to argue, and then we have our community leader in our community who's one of the main persons that's tearing people down, who's trying to do something effective. And my major thing is let's work together rather than be enemies, because it ain't about who gets the credit. It's just about that the work gets done. And so here's a question that I have for us. Let me give you some context. The leading cause of death for black males age 0 to 44 is homicide. Black men under 44, listen to this, black men under 44 are the only demographic group in the U.S. for which the leading cause of death is homicide. 35% of deaths of black children under the age of 19 are from a homicide, compared to 4% in white children, 5% in Asian children, 9% in Hispanic children. 90% of murders of black Americans were committed by other black Americans. 8% were committed by whites. 210 out of 234 by police officers, 17 of those were unarmed. 2% by others. 14% of murders of white Americans are committed by black Americans, compared to 7% murders of black Americans by white Americans. This means whites are killed by blacks at double the rate than blacks are killed by whites. So why is there a narrative being sold to black Americans that white supremacy or supremacists are the biggest threat to the black community? Now, let me say this real quick. I know that this is not a popular question, but it makes us look ourselves in the mirror. I know we want to focus on Black Lives Matter and all that. I understand that, and I'm black, so I'm pro-black as well. However, I think that at some point we have to look into the mirror, because I was always taught this, that I know when I leave out of the house that there are traps set up for me.
Yes.
And so since I know that there are traps that are set up for me, it's going to give me wisdom in how I maneuver. I've been pulled over in Austin and driving an expensive car, and a police officer asked me, what do I do for a living to drive such a car? I told him, Google me. I mean, what do you mean? You know, what am I doing? I probably have more education than you have. I'm just an African American. So I know that these things exist. However, we must equip ourselves and stop with the self-inflicted wounds. And so my question is, why are we focused so much on things that are, to me, minute? Because the greatest issue is the black male is missing in the home. We don't take advantage of education. In our community, there's no church in our community that's an African-American church that has a thriving youth ministry that's doing real ministry, not where we just have a women's ministry, we have a missions ministry, and the mission women don't ever do mission. They just meet, choir rehearsal, Sunday school, youth day. But to me, real outreach is looking into the community, seeing what the needs are, and then coming back to the drawing board and drawing ministries that meet those needs. Then the church is relevant, but that takes too much work. That takes too much time. We're not willing to do that. So my question is simply this to you. Why is this narrative being pushed, and why do we always hold on to this side, but we don't see Black Lives Matter in Chicago, where black-on-black crime is being committed over and over and over? Nor do we see people in our community right here in Edna, Texas, who see these children walking around. We have us a little young gang going around that I hear about in our community. Nobody's doing anything to prevent it.
Let me address your premise. The whole term black on black is a misnomer. Let me tell you why. In Chicago, you've got areas that are dilapidated where you destroy the entire structure. What you see there is, you see an influx of drugs and weapons there and no economy. Now, just be clear, according to the FBI crime report, white folks also kill each other at 87% rate. So crime is more prevalent in any group. It's just the way it is. So let's clarify that. But number two, I would say to you, let's go back to Al Capone, who brought Tommy guns to Chicago and was doing white on white stuff, but they don't call it that. You know why he did it? Because they was fighting for profit over alcohol. What did they do? They came in and ended that, called prohibition, and guess what? Capone went to jail and they stopped it. When you go to Chicago, they purposely there let those communities fall with no infrastructure, no jobs, not even police, and they put drugs on the street. Now, the economy in those areas you're talking about, the South Side, I've been to Eaglewood plenty of times, and I spoke at University of Chicago. What you see there is essentially young black kids hustling because, number one, they don't have any job opportunities. Studies show if you take any community, basically, and destroy it in terms of economic structure, next comes the family, next comes the sociology. I would say to you, if you go to those communities and bring in funds, rebuild the communities where there's jobs, those kind of things, those crimes will go down. And just a final point. We was in Chicago 2 years ago, and I noticed that by Kennedy King College, and this place has been ran down for years, all of a sudden there's a Starbucks on the corner. Uh-oh, here it comes. When those major corporations come in, all of a sudden they push people further out. So I'm going to say, again, that is a symptom of much larger problem. When people are beat down, kicked down, they don't have the equal quality of life. Right here in Edna, for example, and I've seen some numbers already, look at your police stats on black stops. They don't have a right to do that. And we ain't got to be perfect. Number two, look at the median income here in Edna among black people and white people. It's embarrassing. What I'm saying is, if your quality of life has diminished, that also affects your mentality. That's why in the white community, they make sure, they go down to the city council, make sure the money is spent equally in their community. In the school system, the same thing. They're going to lobby because there's a thing called white privilege, white supremacy, that gives folks these benefits. Any population of people without an economy, based on our background, without a social structure, is going to commit more crimes. You address that by number one. It ain't just a family thing, because I'm going to tell you something, brother. If I'm out here and I'm hungry every day and I can't feed my families, that causes all kinds of problems. Yeah. So I'm saying, number one, that's what Biden is doing now, cutting the rate of poverty, economic empowerment in our neighborhoods. They get in our neighborhoods all the time. And also, I'm always talking about that. All the money goes to certain neighborhoods.
Let me ask you this.
So one quick point.
Okay.
So their kids, they make mistakes, they get jobs. And so you have a very low unemployment rate, which is a major factor for the other stuff. But in our community, there's a correlation between high unemployment rate and illegal activity. That's my explanation of why we see what we see.
Yeah. Because poverty is, to me, is not a nationality or ethnicity, it's an ideology. You put white people in poverty, you put black people in poverty, you put Hispanics in poverty, Asians, you're going to have the same problem.
No, but poverty is based on, I'm talking about income. There is a standard for income.
Yeah.
I'm saying the poverty rate is what you actually make.
Yeah.
That's a fight.
That's why I'm agreeing with you.
So if you can't pay your bills, if you can't feed your family, and all these factors around you where folks are doing things based on survival, it's going to have more upheaval. What I'm saying is, when you eliminate that, the other things also decrease.
So let me say this. One of the issues that we're having, you both can answer this, just quick questions so we can get some solutions.
Sure.
I want to move to solutions. One of the things that I see, and I put it in one of my sermons called Truth is in Trouble, just looking out at things. One day I was driving into town. When I'm driving to town, I always drive through the neighborhood, see what has changed. Pass by the projects. What's that street where I'm at the projects? Make that left. Japheth's daddy used to live in that house. What's that? Cedar Street. And the week before, that house was sitting there because I'm in construction. The house only needed a front door, maybe a new roof and some windows. Structure was pretty much intact. But I come back the next week and it's knocked down. And I mean aggressively. Now in the city, like in Austin, we have what is going on is called gentrification. But then in small towns like Edna, we have something that's called demolition. But yet there are not any, I haven't heard of any policies, and I even had a politician to come here one Sunday and share his political agenda, and we talked about him winning, but he never got to what his political agenda was, as every time that we've spoken. And so one of my questions to you is, what can we do as it relates to affordable housing? Because right now that I know of, and whenever I sat down and spoke with the powers that be, there was no agenda for affordable housing. When I stated what I see, there wasn't even a response. It was just move on, as if I didn't say anything. And so even the projects, I went to some members' house the other Sunday that live at the projects just to go speak to them. And when I walked in their house, those projects looked the same way on the inside as they did when I was a little kid. I mean, walls that were once white are now brown because they haven't been renovated. And so my question to you is, what is it that we could do other than voting, but what is it that we can do to change these things, and so that the same money that they're using to knock down these houses, that we can use that same money to just fix them up?
Can I speak on?
Go ahead, then we'll hear from the two.
You know, just backtrack just a little bit as far as what you're saying about we're too focused on the oppressor. And, you know, that what you spoke of, to go into that, you have to deal with the fact that from the age of slavery on into freeing the slaves, which they did it, they took the chains off physically and put them on our people mentally. So you have a psychological conditioning to where we are at war with each other because I value where you come from, that you had two parents, but because I don't have that, I'm envious of that. And because of that envy, I'm gonna dislike anything that you do that's positive just because that's just in me, because I am a negative person. But at the same time, it is the upbringing that we are not teaching these things within the better their household. We talk about poverty, and we talking about the advancement of the people dealing with the economy and economics. Those things are not being taught in the home. You look at the Asians, you look at the whites, you look at any other demographic of people, they are teaching finance, they are teaching business, they are teaching politics, they are teaching law. That is why they have those positions that they have today. See, we rather go when we talk about illegal activity, I can speak about myself. I go get me $10,000, I'd rather go buy me a $10,000 chain rather than take $10,000 and go buy me a jewelry store or build my own and own one. And that is the thinking, that is the mindset. When we talk about black people, see, you said something that was significant. Having done time in prison, one of the biggest things in prison is race. When you talk about pride, the biggest people in there who are the least is Caucasians. But the biggest thing to them is white pride. And they stand on that, and they live through that, and they carry that from out here into the prison and back out. But black people, when you talk about black pride, that's the first thing they say. Oh, I'm not finna million-man march behind a TV. When you had a certain demographic of people who wanted to come over and tell us in prison that, oh, we need this TV because we have a certain amount of numbers. So when you talk about black pride, that is something that being taught as well within our youth and even with everyone, from the smallest to the biggest, that it's okay to be prideful and have pride for who you are and what you believe in. But when we start to teach those things and institutionalize those things within ourselves, and I say institutionalize ourselves with those things because when you have an institution, they teach those things that are valuable to you. Yeah. Because it's embedded within you. And that's the thing about here in Edna. You say that there's no men who want to help with the youth. I'm one of them.
Why show me?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. That is one of the most important things to me because at 16 years old, I never thought that I'd be having a 30-year sentence for murder and have to do 15 years. And then turn around and do another 9. So you figure from the time that I was born until the age of 44, right now you look at it, I've only been free as an adult male for no less than 5 years of my total life. Wow. Now how sad is that? And I can say that's sad because I can only blame myself for that. I make no excuses for anything that I have done. But also with the institution, there is no such thing as rehabilitation. So what these brothers are saying about the juveniles, as far as if we have to come together in community and provide those things, yes, we have to, because when those juveniles get out of TYC, especially in Texas, and they come back, they was did 8 months on a 12-month sentence. And guess what their mentality is? Back to where they were, because the people didn't teach them anything. I don't believe in rehabilitation, because rehabilitation doesn't do nothing but send you through the cycle. And that's all that they want you to do when you get caught up in the criminal justice system is go through the open door. But see, when you break the cycle, not only do you break the cycle of criminal institutionalization, but you have to break the cycle of a broken home. Because like you said, that's the biggest, number one thing with us is no black male figure. When these brothers were coming along, it was important that the black male figure was in the home and raising their kids. And that's the thing. We have to be able to raise our kids and not put it off on the woman to raise the child.
I'm going to come back to that, but this is what I want to go back to. Affordable housing. And the reason why I say that is because your greatest cost is housing. And if people don't have affordable housing and know where to live, then, and I know it because I own property in town, people will call me, is your property available to be rented? And there's not enough places to rent in Edna. Obviously, there's a scheme and an agenda, aggressive agenda, to move people out. So what can we do?
Well, great question. In Austin, Texas right now, my office is in East Austin for 21 years. The average house costs $500,000.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
When I got there in 2000, my neighborhood, my business was 80% blank. So it was an intentional effort there, number one, to gentrify the area. And what they did, they brought in the corporations. They outlawed a thing called inclusionary zoning, which used to be when they bought property.
That was inclusionary zoning?
Inclusionary zoning. That was stopped by the city council because when you bought these properties, as rich folks did, you had also built affordable housing. They got that dismissed from the state and city level. So what happened is all these condominiums came in and increased the property taxes, and guess what? Black folks went to Maynard, Del Valle, and Pflugerville. Now they're going south. So that was a government policy by the majority. I don't need to call their names. Short story in Gonzales. I worked there a lot. Got about 5 calls from folks in Gonzales in a public housing place down there where folks wouldn't repair the apartments, wouldn't keep them clean, couldn't get water. So I wrote a letter. So look, I said, you guys are violating the Fair Housing Act. So we're going to give you 10 days to address this because we see a disparity among black people and some brown people. Guess what they did? Went in and cleaned up the property. I went down there, took care of the issue. But that's a legal issue. But the folks called me, and we did it. Now, they didn't know initially that you guys should call the federal government or call the NACP, and we could address that issue. If we saw disparities in the housing where windows were not even fixed properly, and water was dirty, those things are a violation. They clean it up right away because guess what? If we file it federally, they get penalized. Now, a lot of times in small towns, I was born in one, you see that a lot. You see no oversight. So if you're in a small town, these folks don't fear you unless you got outside intervention. So and when I tell people, when you hear something like that, either in Gonzales or Cuero or Yoakum, I know the area very well, you Steve, give me a call. And typically, I write a letter, get a response the same day. I said, I'm going to see you in 10 days. I come down there, they greet me, and guess what? Typically, the stuff is fixed.
So let me ask you this.
Edna,
can the money that's being spent, I guess, I don't know how this works because I'm not a politician. I just know the Bible. So whenever, one of my questions is this, whenever these houses are being knocked down aggressively in our community, right, that could be restored.
Right.
They already know that our people, because of the wage of living that we receive on this side of town, most people are not, they don't have the resources to buy a home. So where does that money come from, and could it be allocated towards fixing it up rather than tearing it down?
Absolutely. There are 2 things right now. There are a lot of federal dollars available. But here's the thing. Just a question first. What is the budget overall for the city of Edna? Anybody knows that?
No, I don't.
I want to give you an assignment. Get those numbers, see where the money is being spent.
Right.
That's very easy to do, right? You can actually propose, number one, that rather than destroying these properties, that they invest in these properties and preserve them and restore them. That's a proposal. But to do that, you got to make your case. I know what it's going to say. Look at the money being spent in this area, and you're going to see a disparate impact in the black community. Austin did the same thing. We have a large black community there. Large community there, and what we did is we looked at the budget. These folks had probably something like $300 million in investments in our community. Well, we called them on it. Guess what they started doing? Rebuilding their properties. And finally, during that winter storm we had in February, almost all our public housing got severely damaged. We found out that they didn't have any repairs down those places for 50 years.
Wow. Exactly.
So now we made them move all those folks out of there. Federal government came in, HUD. They're now rebuilding that entire area. So the key is going to be check your budget, see where money is going. It's right there. Then you make your case. Because that's discrimination.
All right, this is my point, okay? Because I could go back with that. Because I could rebuttal what you said. I learned, like I said, my committee and we went and we learned about the properties that we have in our community that's where there's old houses that, the ones that they had up for demolition, the ones that got torn down for demolition, you know what happened? Some of those property owners, the city ate those taxes up. So what the city does, they charge you to go back and mow. What does the city do? They tax it on that. So now the city owns that property now because number one, you have too many heirs on that property. You may have 5 heirs on one property and 2 live in Houston.
But where's the money come from to knock it down?
From the city budget because it comes from them.
So my thing is that money could be allocated to fix it up rather than to tear it down, right?
This is the thing. Many of the homes that they've torn down around here, you know why they're tearing them down? Because they cannot be rebuilt. Because you have a floodway and flood zone.
But okay, but here's another question for you though, because this has happened to me that I got a property over here that is in a flood zone, I guess, area.
No, you're in a floodway. If you can't build on it, you're in a floodway.
But here's the thing though, we have this Dollar Tree that went up over here, and that place, that area, you know what I'm talking about, right there about in between the car wash on Main Street.
They rezoned us. The federal government FEMA just rezoned us.
But that always floods though. But they were able to raise that property up when they were building it so that it could be built there. It seems as though to me that's strategic.
Well, let me tell you about the strategy. And
they're doing the same thing with TA and Grenada.
I can go in depth about the strategy, and I can take it deeper because I'm close to
Yeah,
You know,
okay, I got you,
people.
I got you.
Every Tuesday, they hold silent bids on property. But do we know that as a black people? No. They do silent bids on property every Tuesday. Now, you come in and you make the flood zone, you rechange it, you redish, and that's one of the biggest things about where they're talking about housing and being able to buy houses and stuff like that, is because one of the biggest things in Houston is red districting. And that goes on in a lot of cities. Where they red district and red line these communities where we can't buy property, or they make the property value so high we can't buy property, because we know that a monetary note that people go crazy about, a dollar bill, whatever it is, has no value because we're on a credit system. They got rid of the gold system a long time ago. So when you talk about you have the credit system, what is valuable is land. Why do you think Bill Gates is buying all this land? So that's the key. That's the thing about us as a people, and in order to be able to be powerful as a people when it comes to having something of value is land. So they redistrict these lands and talk about to make them floodplains and flood zones so that they can tear all these houses down, get all these properties, and later when they lift them, they own them.
Brother, let me say this, please.
Let him speak. Let them two speak real quick.
But please, man. That's a legal issue, and it's not that complicated. Frankly, I'm an insurance agent. I deal with flood zones all the time. There's a place called Onion Creek in Austin, Texas. It's on I-35. You've seen it before, brother. They destroyed the whole community, bad flood, about 5-6 years ago. The city council got together based on our request and refunded all those homes and rebuilt most of them. And the other folks who don't want to stay there, they gave them another house. So that's a function of government. If you're in a flood zone, you can rebuild. That's a city responsibility, because guess what? The flood zone don't change but almost every 100 years. Yeah. Now it's every 50 years. So that was an illegality anyway. So it ain't that big as Bill Gates. This is a simple policy. If people are tearing these houses down, I can assure you, brother, if you write a letter and say what you want to do in terms of reinvestment and restructure, you got them. Then they got to give you an intelligent legal response. Because you know what? If they don't do it legally, you also have HUD, federal government. Right now, they're all over Austin because we file complaints. Now, again, you're under the radar, but it's not, these guys just can't tear stuff down. And they can't really do that unless you let them do it. I'm saying, write a letter explaining what you want to do with these homes. You say you want to rebuild them and help your community. Make them respond to your inquiry. That's how you stop this stuff, because they're not being challenged legally.
Okay. Let me move to Mr. Pickens real quick, so give him some time to share with us. One of the things that we talked about via phone is education. I'm just going to give context to this. One day I was leaving the church, driving back into Austin, stopped through Lakeway at a place where I normally hang out, watch the game. I walked in, I had a suit on, sat down by an older white gentleman who obviously was a well-to-do man based on that side of town. And obviously it had a few drinks. And so when I sat down on side of him, he just kept looking me up and down from head to toe. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he said to me, this is the first time anyone had ever said to me this, said this to me openly. He tapped me on the shoulder and said this to me. He said, a young man like you is dangerous. And he stepped back and sat back down and watching the thing. I didn't know why he said what he said. And so then he said to me, after hearing me speak, he said it again, a young man like you intimidates men like me. He said, an intelligent black man who's well-dressed, who has some wits about himself, and then the way you walked in here, and he said, I don't know how you walked in here. Well, I said, well, what do you mean how you? He said, you know how you walked in here all confident. I said, we call it swag. He said, yes, that intimidates men like me. And so what I want to say is this, is that whenever we were talking, I never knew that people felt that way. Now, I'd heard that, but I never heard it out of the horse's mouth. And so, obviously, if there was a reason, there's a reason why during slavery we couldn't read, that they didn't want us to be educated, that they wanted to use the Bible to further suppress us by making us read the epistles that talks about being slaves and slaves be subject to your master. So I want you to share with me some of the things that you've shared with us about how education has the power to transform and also even liberate us out of some of these challenges that we're in, not just Mr. Pickens, but both of you. Because we're about to be shut down here pretty soon.
Okay. Well, one of the things that pushed me growing up was the fact that my parents had expectations. That's number one. Right? But then as a child, sometimes you have your own mind, and you know their expectations may take a back seat to someone with your friends want and what you end up gravitating toward. But one of the things that made me put another focus on education was, we were all born in Alabama, but my father had joined the Coast Guard. But before he got to the Coast Guard, he had finished 8th grade, and he told them, this was in the 1950s, right? 1949. He said, I want to go to high school. He said the school officials looked at him and said, nigga, there's a lot of cotton out here. So he was not allowed to go to high school.
Oh, wow.
We're not going to let you mix and mingle with our white kids at the high school. There's a lot of cotton out here. You have an 8th grade education. Be happy with that. So he said for 2 years, he did farming. And rent was $3 a month. And had it not been for his grandfather, because his father was deceased, his grandmother and the other 5 children would not have made it. Food to mouth, roof over their head. So he said at 16, he lied and went into the Coast Guard, told them he was 18, told them he had a high school diploma. He didn't. So he said when he actually turned 18, he couldn't celebrate because that would bring dishonorable discharge because of false enlistment. So, you know, and he was telling me this, I was 14. He was going to GED school. And he said, when you go to school, you pay real good attention to your algebra. He said, because I'm going to need that. It's going to be on this test. So at 14 years old, I was coming back from school, and then at night I was doing algebra with my father so that he could pass the GED math portion. And he did, and he got his GED. But the thing was, they would not allow him to go to cooking school unless he had a high school diploma. And he had been in the Coast Guard 6 years cooking for men on the ship. So now he was able to go to cooking school. And from there, it was able to make a difference. And, you know, he started working at the Hilton cooking. And what it did in terms of education was it gave me a newer outlook on the value of education. Because I saw the change that it made in his life from 8th grade to now. He's got a family with 3 children and a wife, and he's working construction and going to school at night. And then it made a change in what he was able to have as income, which you were talking about, the sociology and the economics. And then we were able to move into a house from the projects. And that made a difference. We were on the 12th floor of a 15-story building with 8 apartments on every floor. And it was 4 of those buildings. So you're talking about a lot of people, a lot of children. So we moved out of the projects and moved into our own home. And that made a difference. But the impact was to see him sitting there, learning from me, to go to school and get his GED. And the benefit was we were able to move out into our own home within a year after he finished.
Wow.
And then, so for me personally, to see that motivated me to go to school and do much better. Okay? It motivated me to say, hey, in 4 years, I'm going to be walking across that stage right there in the school stadium to get my diploma. And then, see, and you have to be careful. When your child tells you something's going on at school, go to the school. And you may think it's not going on, but a lot of times they want to destroy the self-esteem, the self-confidence of a young black child, male and female. Okay? So, you know, when I was in high school, I went to see my counselor. I said, hey, you know, I want to put in my applications to college. He said, hold on a second. Let me talk to you. Went in the office, he gave me a card. My high school guidance counselor gave me a card for the Army. You can come out as a young man in 20 years, you'll be 18. Now, 38. Now, when you're 18, 38 is so far away. But he was encouraging the students who I know I had better grades than, but he was discouraging me. When I made my applications and got accepted to 2 colleges and gave him to him so he could put my name on the wall like everybody else who got accepted to college, he was upset He was upset. He wanted to know. Well, did you go see my man down there at the Army station? I said, yeah, I talked with him. I lied. I didn't talk with him. I didn't go nowhere near that place. 73, everybody's going to Vietnam. The black kids in my community, I saw them with a high school graduation picture. They graduated from Marines, and then next thing you know, they were in the funeral home. That was that quick. So the self-esteem. My son was in the 4th grade. The lady told him, sit in the back. As long as you're quiet, shh, you'll make a C. I did a spot visit one day. I was like, let's see how this guy is doing, right? Checking on my child. I go in there and I'm looking through the window. I said, where is he at? So the vice principal said, there he is back there. Him and 3 other boys. You know, they fold a little thing up and flipping, you know.
Oh, they flicking football.
Taking field goals.
Taking field goals.
Fucking field goals. And so I walk in and I talk with the teacher and I said, I'm here to help you. I stayed all day. I stayed all day.
On his side.
And I sat right next to him and I asked him, why are you and these, well, why are y'all back here? And the other kids live on my block. I said, why are y'all back here? Well, she told us if we sit back here, if we're quiet, we'll make a scene. I said, when you go home tonight, you better tell your father because I'm going to knock on your door. You better tell your mother because I'm going to knock on the door. Their self-esteem, once it is attacked, once it is diminished, then you don't have to worry about them trying
Anymore.
because they've already been desecrated
There you go.
in terms of
Right.
an aspiration for something better. I told my son, I said, yeah, I know you want to play basketball, but I tell you what. Well, Dad, the school said if I make a C, I said, no, your school don't live here. I'm saying you have to make A's and B's. Then you can play football. Then you can play basketball. Were you harder on me? I said, I want to make sure that when you finish high school, you have not just a diploma, but you actually have a high school education. That means you know how to read, you know how to analyze, you know some math, and you'll be able to function in society. I said, that's my job as your father. I said, now, if you go to school over there and you're only making C's, you won't be at practice. You won't play on the team. So we have to have, I think, expectations of our children. We have to build up their self-esteem for their education. And a good foundation in that is Black history. What you're doing with Juneteenth. That is significant to say, hey, this is where we come from. These are the achievements that we have accomplished. There's a book by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. Okay? These kind of things say, hey, you have to expect greater things from yourself and then from your children. And when you do that, they're going to walk a little taller.
Yes, sir.
They're going to go to school and try harder because you expect a little bit more from them.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, when they make A's and B's, you're going to say, hey, this is what I expect out of you.
And these are the rewards from this.
And you get them the rewards. The rewards will come. But the attack on the Black child's psychological makeup is what destroys them now. You were alluding to it about, hey, if I don't think that I could, I'm not going to be a challenge for something greater in my life. And it has nothing to do with anybody else. It just has to do with me and my life. So people don't have to worry about the Black child because if they're not going to try, their self-esteem is diminished, then they won't try. So therefore, they're not going to be competitively, academically.
I want to point the question so we can move towards solutions. Okay. And so he's giving me one that you, as we talked about, that's one of the great things he shared was the confidence. If you destroy that with a kid, it's going to hurt them for the rest of their life. So we have to build a confidence up. Here's my specific question for our church, and really, because I really don't want it to be a Shiloh thing, but a community effort that we join with other churches, right? So my question in our community, my question is, what can we do as a church to reinforce, because from research and after 1865, after we were freed, most colleges and stuff and schools were birthed out of the church, and it seems somewhere along the lines we've lost that, this social justice, this prophetic voice of the black church. So my question to you is, what can we practically do to educate our children and to guard against them going to prison, and how can we start a pipeline not just to college but also to institutions like Job Corps where they can get trades? What would you suggest?
3 things. We've got to cite history. You mentioned Woodson's book, critical book about miseducation, as far as what black people can do. Right now, look at Tulsa on TV. It's more than one Tulsa. Black folks built business communities all over the South that were successful. So quit saying that we can't do things. That's not true.
Yeah.
In Austin, Texas, we once ran 6th Street.
What was that?
We once ran 6th Street.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, so why are people saying we can't build businesses now? We were attacked physically in many cities, Rosewood as well. These people were destroyed. Others were attacked by racist policies. So we need to quit saying that. We were great business people. Read Booker T. Washington, The Atlanta Exposition.
Yeah.
So we are great entrepreneurs. Look at what we created in this world. Cell phones and other things. We need to dismiss that. So, but to your point, brother, NACP, we have 6 very important committees: economics, employment, housing, neighborhood sustainability, police and safety, and health care. I would create 6 committees in my church, have leaders of every committee. Their job is to monitor what's happening in the city on health care, on housing, economic development, and those things, and report monthly. Because that's going to mean, number one, you got to be politically active. Once those committees are formed, lay out your goals and objectives, and make sure they address what's happening in the county and in the city. And every month, they ought to be reporting here about what's happening business-wise, otherwise, and police-wise. That's how the NACP was formed. We went from that to an organization now with over 2,000 units in the nation. The other thing is, and that's why I'm saying this, see, part of our issue is not just education, it's miseducation. We buy what people say. When King went to Chicago, you know he stopped in Cabrini Greens, right? It was so bad he couldn't live there. He said after a week he felt mentally ill. He was telling you how it feels to be poor and in conditions where you got roaches everywhere. Well, Chicago tore down all those apartments and they pushed those young people and families in the South Side. They started having decent housing and viable communities. Our history is our key, because when you see that, you see, number one, the impact of racism and how to address it. We have to be involved, but you're not going to be involved until you see the big picture.
Yeah.
The big picture is all these issues are solvable. And I know once you form committees and start preaching responsibility and incentives, these people are going to show up. And when the folks around you around the city see that, they're going to have a whole different perspective on what you're doing. First time I've been to Edna, but I did a lot of work in the Gonzales, Cuero, Yoakum, China, and they're all different. But in small towns, typically, that's not going on for a lot of reasons. People, they feel frightened. In many cases, they are depressed. They got to see people doing things.
Well content.
They got to see, exactly. In Austin, Texas, Google my work in Austin, Texas, a city of 1 million people, and see what we've done. The main thing is we challenge the existing status with data.
Oh, I know you will challenge. I know that about you.
But when you know your history,
I know
brother,
that about
and what you
you.
have created financially, that's why they stopped. They addressed that.
Yeah.
Don't never tell yourself you can't do things economically. Look, after 1865, black folks had the greatest era in our history called Reconstruction.
Yes, sir.
You know what happened to that? In 1877, a thing called the Great Compromise, where the Republicans and Democrats had a tie elections. They couldn't figure it out. They cut a deal. Democrats, they were in the KKK. They said, look, I'll tell you what, get the federal troops out of the South, and we'll give you the presidency. They gave the presidency to a guy named Rutherford B. Hayes. Dude named Samuel Taylor, and said, okay, we got the South back. Now they ran black folks off the property, killed many of them, and the KKK was born. Every time we've had areas of progress, we have been attacked physically. That's why I talk about racism. Can't ignore that. And that kind of behavior has created some insecurities in us. But if you
But it's not so blatantly seen these days.
It's not. But that's why you got to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
But
That
it's
should be
there.
one category. That's not be 2 income levels in Edna, Texas. I guarantee you the white folks make twice as much as black folks make. Why? Because they control the economy.
Yeah.
Those things can be addressed. The issue of housing. Something you told me, that's illegal. That can be stopped. They can't just tell something because of a flood zone. They can't do that. But you got to challenge that and put forth a proposal on your housing committee. Teach them, number one, write a proposal. Say, look, why are you tearing these properties down in our community when they can be restored, restructured, and serve somebody?
Yes, sir.
But you got to answer questions. So form these committees on everything that you're doing, and got to address police issues. You see, the thing about police is, you'll find this kind of funny. When I was on Austin's case in 2005, they kept telling me, Nelson, why do black folks run from the police or don't comply? I put out almost a book of different cases. These numbers show white folks run more than black folks. Now what you gonna say? But you ain't shooting them in the back. So the whole thing about what we're doing, I don't even accept that, because you know what, other folks are doing it. We always call for equal protection of the law. That's what America says in its Constitution.
So I want Mr. Pickens to be last. I'm gonna give y'all two opportunities, just give your last words or whatever you want to share with us. And it's hard talking about these issues, not getting engulfed with the issue that we don't get to the solution. So I want y'all to leave us with some practical things that we can do, because I'm gonna take them seriously and try to put them into practice. We all are, as we will work together to make this place a better place along with others. But if you would share with us, just share briefly anything that you have, just real quick, that you would like to share, leave with us, any nuggets that you would like to drop off with us based on what we've shared, just in concluding remarks.
Briefly, just the fact that, I'm a tool, either a tool for construction or a tool for destruction.
Oh, I like that.
You know what I mean? So, it takes people having to reach out to people. You know what I mean? If no one reaches out to me, I don't know who to reach out to, because I'm not involved as much with everybody.
Okay.
Because I've been gone and just getting back, being here after 3 years, I don't really know everybody. People have moved off, people have died off. I don't know anybody. But when Shannon reached out to me to be a part of the Juneteenth committee, I said, sure, and so my thing is that I'm willing, you know what I mean? I'm also an ordained minister, so me and you spoke about that briefly. You told me that you needed some help over here.
Yes, sir.
And I've come, into the congregation a few times, and just to come because I enjoy coming. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like minds think alike. So in two minds are greater than one. So we put our minds together and come up with something that you feel like that we can do moving forward, and you would like for me to be a part of that, then I'm open to that.
I'll use you this month. We'll talk about it afterwards.
All right, yeah, for me, my push is this. Like I said, I can go back to one of your stories. I was a name called in kindergarten because of my last name. Just to say, when I got old enough to where I was in maybe 7th and 8th grade, I asked my mama, could I get my last name changed?
I remember that.
I really did, because of the ridicule of who my last name was. When I got up in age, 7th, 8th grade, I got my last name changed. But that didn't change the person who God designed me to be. So I took that role as being the neighborhood cleanup guy, the pickup trash guy. To call me when you need some heavy stuff taken out, or you need your tree trimmed, or you got some brushes that need to be hauled off. So I'm gonna continue to be that guy, even with the ridicule that I know that's gonna come. So I'm just gonna stand firm on that. In any area, Juneteenth committee, Shiloh Church, our entire community need me at, just let me know. I'm only a phone call away, and I'll be available.
That's good. Shanna, you didn't say much. You want to share something with us? Please, you got to say something.
Well, I just plan to continue to be involved with whatever I can. I do plan on running for city council again, because I do feel like I got cheated. But that's another story. I mean, it's going to take some time, but I'm not going nowhere. I see that there hasn't been anything done the whole time that I've been here, and we need new representation in the office so that we can get the community things done in the area. Because if we don't have anyone to represent us, nothing's going to be accomplished, which if you look around and see that, open your eyes, you'll be able to see that nothing has changed, despite what has been said. That's about it.
All right. Do you guys have something that you want to share with us?
I have a thing that we did at church to help with the children. We did a tutoring program, and majority of the people who were there were they were not teachers who volunteered, and we got some grade level books from Barnes and Noble in terms of reading comprehension and math that were appropriate to the grade level, and we just ran off copies at the church. We did that program on Tuesday and Thursday night, and they come in and 6 o'clock, we'd go to one class, and then we take a break. About 45 minutes later, they go downstairs, they had something for them in terms of snacks, and then they go back and do reading comprehension. I was the math guy, so I had my son and my other son, my niece, my nephew in the class, 4th and 5th graders together. And one of the big things was the math word problems, but we overcame those and we tutored in that vein. And it made a difference in how the students saw their capabilities. Because here's the trick. I had 4th and 5th grade students, but when I gave them work to do, it was 3rd grade work. Right? So for about the first 3 weeks, they were just, we just love your daddy. Your daddy is the best teacher. They would tell us, but they were doing third grade work. That was to get buy-in.
Yeah, build a relationship.
Their level of confidence that they could do the work. Now, these are 4th and 5th grade students, so they were like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm gonna go to Mr. Pickens' class.
Yeah.
And they did the work, and I was like, okay, yeah, take the pencil. Yeah, hey, that's your reward for doing good, right? So now, 2, 3 weeks later, I move them into 4th grade work.
Okay.
Building them up.
There you go.
Because I want their confidence elevated that they can do it.
I understand. Yes, sir.
So then I moved them into 5th grade work. And we focused on math word problems. Before the end of the year, I had 4th and 5th graders doing 6th grade level work. So at the end of the year, when they took that end of the year exam, Iowa Basic Skills, California end of the year test, they scored higher in math. And did I get dejected along the way? Yeah, I figured, these kids not getting it. I don't think what's going on. One day I went around there, and this one little girl jumped out her parents' car and ran straight toward me, jumped up in my arms, and her face was right here. Mr. Pickens, in my class today, we did math word problems. I knew the magic word to say add. I knew the magic word to tell me I had to subtract, and my teacher wanted to know how I did it, and I told her right here at New Hope Baptist Church, 149 Prospect Street, East Orange, New Jersey.
Amen.
And I looked at her and I said, that's so great. I gave her a big hug. But the thing was, the buy-in was, start at the lower grade. Even though they were 4th and 5th graders, I started at 3rd grade level. I made them think this is going to be hard. Put your thinking caps on. Once they saw it, they were looking at each other all sly, like, is he? But their confidence level is what was built at that first. So they kept coming. And we had a couple that came, and so they would actually cook. The man was retired Army and retired post office, so he was retired. His wife was teaching school, and so they came every Tuesday and Thursday. They brought the food enough for all of the children.
Wow.
So at the end of the year, their grades and their end of the year scores on state tests was higher. That's one thing to help the children out. Even if you start out one day a week, you're offering something. So that could help with their self-esteem and the academics, okay? The other side is someone in your position, sir, and your position, with this, have some counseling. Go to, write a proposal and go to the juvenile probation and ask them to send the kids here to Shiloh to do a counseling program, and you could sit around once a month and just talk about the consequences of bad choices.
Good idea.
And being equipped with the knowledge of what your rights are, and yes, have expectations of what the police officer should, how he should approach you, but know your rights, and then understand what the ramifications are, because the consequences are devastating. How you can be here one day, walking in the community, something happened, and you're facing something that has changed your world forever. And those those two things, I think a counseling program with those youth that are already in juvenile, and then the program for education, because with the education program, the academic, we only got children, the parents brought them there up to the 7th grade. But that's a good foundation, because if they get a very good foundation and have a high level of personal self-confidence and self-esteem, when they get to high school, it's just a matter of doing the work. They have all the skills that they need to be successful in high school and beyond, because they'll have knowledge of words, they'll have reading capacity.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The probation officer can make that mandatory that they have to come and be a part of. Does he have the authority to make that a stipulation for
What I'm talking about is an overall where the judges would make it a part of their sentence as a condition of their juvenile probation to come here
And go through the course of
and
class.
go through the course, and you have a whole class of curriculums. So when I say write up a proposal, what are you gonna do in terms of counseling? You could say it's gonna last 3 months. You know, you meet once a week, and then, you know, based on their attendance, give them a certificate or something once they
Right,
finish it.
exactly.
But that would be your
Mhm.
counseling program to avert recidivism in juveniles and to avoid continued juvenile delinquency.
I've heard that.
Okay? So those kind of things would say, this juvenile, because I talk with kids and I talk with people who've been in prison, and they tell me, Mr. Pickens, we ain't listening to you. You've been through college. You don't know what I've been dealing with. So I say, okay, fine. Who are you gonna listen to? Somebody who knows my struggle.
Yeah.
Okay? Not to be negative, but to be effective and to communicate to them
Have that
that you don't want to be like me, and let me tell you what I've been through.
Yeah.
And now what do you want to do? And just hit them straight between the eyes. You not too young to go to prison. You 15, you 16, based on the seriousness of the crime, and then based on what's your juvenile delinquency record. If you been found delinquent a few times, they could use both of those things and say send you away. In the federal system, those are only 2 things they look at, because they want to make sure the person is sentenced correctly. They don't rub 2 nickels together about rehabilitation, about teaching and training and educating or anything like that. Okay? We have to take the bull by the horn and say, hey, listen, read this. It's 2 pages. Now tell me what you think. What's the book? Frederick Douglass, in his book, I believe it's chapter 6. He talks about the fact that his master's new wife was teaching him letters and how to read.
Yep.
The master came in and said, don't you ever teach him how to read. It will make him discontented and unhappy.
Would be a
You know, happy to be a slave, unhappy to be a slave. Frederick Douglass said at that point, he knew the power to keep me a slave was to keep me ignorant. And he said he did everything he could. He took them little baked cakes next door to the little white boy next door so that he could look at that boy's reader book. And that's how he learned to read. And that's how he was able to escape from slavery and write papers so that he could get north. Okay? So the value of education, you know, is very powerful. And that's why I push that. You know, I'm working in the criminal justice system. My success has been sharing what I know with people who are in the system. Listen, you got to charge drugs. They're going to drug test you as you go to court within the next 4 or 5 months. Stop. Be smart. Because if you're positive, I got to tell the judge, and if the judge knows that, he's going to lock you up. That means your sentence is going to be longer. Be smart. Oh, come on, Mr. Pickens, no excuse. But see, I could get through to him on how to deal with going in and out of court. And then next thing you know, hey, I got probation. I told you how to do it. Sharing knowledge, it makes a big difference. So that's been my thing, to do that, to share knowledge. I've done the tutoring because, you know, I had children going through it. I enjoyed it. You know, if they understand how to do math word problems, then hey, you go to school, you can do it.
Before you go, I got one last question that was really, this was asked of me specifically to ask this question either to the both of you, but it's probably a better question for you, but I'm sure you would know as well. We have a problem in our community where people can't afford an attorney. So I have a person right now who couldn't afford it at the time, an attorney, so they had to get a court appointed. And a lot of times what happens, from what I understand, is that these court appointed attorneys try to push them to take pleas, which is the worst thing ever from what I'm being told. And so, is there any resources, are there any resources available, programs available that people can, if they've never been in the judicial system before, don't know how to navigate it, sometimes they can end up with more time because they're just not educated on what to do. So who to call.
I can take that. NACP has a committee. One is called the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. We get calls all over Texas about that particular problem, about you have an attorney who's not talking to you in plea bargaining. We have a team that will review that case for you and give you some feedback about what you can do. In other words, do you have proper legal? No, it's not pro bono. It's just that we're getting your case with an attorney that's on it, who's been appointed by the state, and they're looking at it independently, saying, "Wait a minute, there's some questions here." Then we'll talk to you if you want that and tell you what to think about the case. So a lot of groups in Austin do that. We get a lot of complaints about lawyers not taking care of their clientele. So NACP is one of them. We work with the Civil Rights Project. We got about 4 groups we work with who do case assessments when you call them in and write me a little note. So definitely, that's very common, by the way, folks having ineffective counsel. And so that can be reviewed to make sure that these people are doing the right thing. Oftentimes when you get a phone call from the outside in, guess what? They actually do better. Can I say one quick thing, Pastor, before I get out of here that's important? This time last week, I was in Austin, Texas. I was at the state capitol. We had organized among all the state representatives and pastors to fight some of these racist Texas voting rights bills. They were going to pass one of the most racist bills in history to deny your right to vote in the state, and it's happening all over the country. If you Google NACP Texas reps, you can see it on the news. We went to the Capitol. We did a press conference saying this is illegal. You should stop it and not do it. But we did more than that. We left the Capitol, and they were invited to Mount Zion Baptist Church that night. They had a private meeting, all the reps, black, brown. They had a strategy. They said, what are we going to do was let these guys have their hearing, and they was going to walk out of it together to destroy the quorum. When they did that, excuse my language, these white folks almost went crazy because it effectively ended the meeting and destroyed that bill. See, when we talk, communicate, and organize, we can do things. So right now, the whole country is doing the same thing. They're saying, look, when these guys have these hearings about these racist bills, we can actually walk out in many cases to prevent a quorum. And they're going to come back. But we have to organize, to your point about running for office. Do you have a voter registration committee here, folks registered to vote in this place? That's a big thing if you're doing that. And the final point is, when you called me and invited me to come here, man, I was excited from day one. Yes, sir. I mean, I was so eager today to get in my car and drive down here because I felt something special. I felt something special because, you know, no matter where you live nowadays in this city, in this state, you are connected to somebody. So if you don't know something, just reach out. And I do this because to me, I see the energy, how it helps people. You're not alone in these issues. Shana, Yoakum got the same problems. So we do these things together with oversight. So you should run for office to make sure you're organized. You get a committee down here for folks registered to vote. I'll certainly give you a contribution. Because that's the key, is having our people get into office and address these kinds of issues. But I want to thank you for the invitation because it just gave, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, about driving down here, thinking about what I was going to do, who I was going to meet, because that's our obligation. It's to serve those who need our help. And so that was so critical. A little phone call led to all this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let me say to you guys, I want to thank you so much to each and every one of you for being on this panel. This is something that really gets me stirred up, as you guys already know. And I want to thank both of you. You guys have been a great example to me as a young man. I've been knowing you since I was in my 20s, and I called you before, asked you to come and be on the panel with Chief Acevedo at the time and all of some of you other political leaders in the community in Austin, and you readily said yes. And then There was a young man that I knew, you remember, in college, who was being railroaded with something that he did not do. You stepped in right away and helped with that and got him connected to a lawyer. And then I look at you, Brother Pickens, you know, every time I've asked you to help out when it comes to young people, and just hearing what you have done since I've been gone, you know, working with young people, trying to help them with test scores, elevating their test scores. I wish there were more men who had the same heart and the same mindset to go back and grab others when you come out. And I want to thank you so much for making this long drive today. Sister Patricia Thomas was supposed to be here today. She was a school teacher in Edna ISD for many, many years. And she was going to give us a perspective from the classroom, but she was not able to be here because her car broke down. And so hopefully we'll be able to do this at some other time and make some progress and come with some solutions. But we're going to use your suggestion as a counseling. I think that would be great. And then also trying to find pipelines to Houston Tillerson. They still have a female president? Is she still there? Yeah. Also to Job Corps, because not all kids are gifted to go to college, but you can make a good money painting. You can make a good money being an electrician or a plumber, make a living. And so there are other avenues. And so what we seek to do at Shiloh is our mission is to be a church that's ministering beyond the church walls. What does that look like? You look out into the community, see needs, come back to the drawing board and write up a vision and ministries with an objective that meets those needs. Then the church always remains relevant. And one of the greatest issues that we have, and I'm closing, is that 98% or 97% of the people that I pastor here in our church, we're single people. And so in our community, many people are not getting married, and so our children are being raised by single parent homes. And so what God has given me the vision is, if I can walk and we can walk alongside of the single mother from the time her child is born till they get into college, and walk alongside of her and assist her with the resources, with the gospel, with the after school program, with a summer camp, with an early childhood development program, then we have them all the way from the time they're children all the way to the time they reach in college. And our goal is to get them into a trade or to get them into college. And we cannot devalue education just because we don't have one. And so what we need is more people who will push and promote education, because it is the key to the success of our children. Anybody have anything before we prepare to leave? Anybody?
I would like to thank you for inviting me. This is something that has really pushed me and motivated me throughout my life, and helping other people see that light, see what it could do for them, how it encourages them, and whether they're a young child or a young man or a young woman, so that they would know that they have value.
Yes, sir.
That they matter, that it is important, their existence. They're not here as some, cosmic rock that just fell out of the sky, that they have a purpose. And once you have a purpose and go forward with your purpose as your cause, to do things, whatever it is, however small you may think it is, it has value, because you never know how many lives you've touched. When I go back in the highway of my mind and my life, the people who have said something to me that was positive, people who have encouraged me along the way. Even when I was a child, when I might have done something wrong, someone had said, "Hey, how's your father doing?" It's like, oh, I wasn't thinking about him. But now that, yeah, he's doing okay. So now I'm gonna think about him, and maybe what I was gonna do with some of my friends kind of change my focus, and those kind of things are critical moments to say, hey, I went this way and not that way. And I tell people, yes, I've had the benefit of education. I've had the benefit of, doing some things, but still, what gives me really something on the inside that pushes me and motivates me even more is when I can see your son know how to handle himself in school with academics, and he has asked for the help, and I've been able to give it to him. When I see your son say, hey, You know, I didn't do too well on a test. I said, well, what do you think was your downfall? And then I listen. Okay, let me tell you what you do. You know, what I can do to help has been my area, okay? And I use that area to push, to uplift, okay? To say, hey, persevere, hang in there. You know, don't give up. I'm gonna be at your graduation. Well, I'm only in 6th grade. Okay, 2 years, I'm gonna be there. 6 years, I'm gonna be there. Don't disappoint me, because, you know, I'm gonna have something for you. You know, give them expectations, the children. Give them also something that's gonna be encouraging as opposed to cutting them down. It's easy to be cut down. And we get cut down sometimes by our own people, and that hurts the most, because that stays with us. Somebody said, oh, you ain't going nowhere in life. Your father went to prison, you're probably gonna end up in prison. You know, your brothers are dope addict, you probably be, you know, hey, we don't need to do that. We need to say, hey, great people have done things, but they have made mistakes. No one's perfect. But since I'm no longer who I used to be, this is what I'm doing now, okay? This is where I'm at now. Judge me from where I'm at now, what I'm doing, not what I used to do, because, hey, everybody makes mistakes. And I'm not a saint, but this is my calling to do this. And if I can push you, encourage you, that's my interest. And I really want to thank you for inviting me here and being able to give some insight into what my life has been, and maybe some programs that would help out, especially with youth and their self-esteem, and with youth to avert recidivism and getting into this system that it is a revolving door that's going down. You know, so some people call it, what kind of pool? It's going down, downward spiral, and you're caught in a vicious cycle of, you know, jail, bail, prison, probation, parole, and back again. And that needs to be curtailed and even ended, because there's no future there. And if we can enlighten some young people to make a change, or just to look at it differently, just to look at it differently, I think that'll be the start of making a change. And if I could come and communicate with them, fine. He can come, he can be here and communicate with them, fine. We'll have a program that says, hey, listen, there are great possibilities.
Yeah.
I know people who have come out of prison and gone on and went to college and then did something different. That doesn't stop them.
Yeah.
But they had a cause in their mind and a commitment in their heart to do something different and to change their life. That's why I applaud anybody who've been through that cycle and come out and say, hey, I'm gonna do something different, and this is where it's gonna start. If I have to work 8 to 5, then go to school, and then take a work on the weekends, I'm gonna do that, because in 2 years, in 1 year, my life's gonna change, and I'm just gonna have an 8 to 5, and it's gonna be a better paying position, and I can do some things different. You know, that has meaning. That has meaning, and it starts to me with not just education, but personal self-confidence and a healthy self-esteem.
Yes, sir.
And that is motivated by knowing our own history, what we have come from and come through, and how the things that we have achieved. That's why I love February. I don't care if anybody says it's 28 days, I love it. Carter G. Woodson says Black History Month, that's what we're gonna do. What contributions we have made in terms of science, medicine, law, education. We've even been in NASA, everything.
Yes, sir.
Not just basketball and football, run fast, jump high, but our intellectual abilities also.
Mr. Linda, you have anything? Anything? You can close us out.
I think I've said enough. There's a lot that we can do if we know what the resources are, what our potential is. I don't think this is calculus. I think it's a matter of having folks who care, who reach out, and inspire people to do better. We know what the problems are, and so I'm more focused on getting to the point and showing examples of what we all can do. And by touching other people in other places, like I said, I'm in Austin, but I was born in Georgia. I don't have any problem driving out here anytime to address these kind of issues. If you ever need help, if you call me, if I can't solve the problem, I can give you a referral. The main thing is know that you can be collected. And I'd love to see the church have committees that address these issues where you are locally, because there are federal funds available to address the issues that we talked about. And when you have a church behind you and a letterhead, it gives you a lot more credibility. So you can do it as an organization, then you can appoint a specialist to do the actual work. But I always encourage people, the black churches by status has access to a lot of grants, a lot of resources. And I help with a lot of that.
Yes, sir.
So the main thing is just know that all these problems are solvable. We're human beings. We've done it before. And we know what the solutions are. It's tough. It's really tough. But I'm convinced that the human strength, the resilience that we have as people, we can overcome any problem. But we can't cheat ourselves. We got to do the work and have the proper understanding. And I'll leave it at that, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me say that we are passionate about bringing about change in our community. I think every single one of us up here, that since we've been talking, and I've talked to you several times, passionate about bringing about change, and we're tired of talking about the problem. Now it's time to come up with solutions to solve the problem. And so that's what we're going to be seeking to do, putting our heads together, using resources like Brother Pickens as well as Brother Nelson Linder, so that we can use the resources that we have to bring about change, because I think that we become complacent because it's a Goliath of a situation. And we feel like we can't bring him down, but if we use God's favor, we can take a rock and a slingshot and bring down a 9-foot tall giant with one rock. It's just going to take unity, and it's going to take the favor of God. And so I pray that we can join together, and us as a community, we don't fight each other, but we become a fist. Because when people fight, I never see people slap, but I do see them punch, because a punch is more powerful than a slap, right? Because it's unity. And so we need unity, because there's prosperity in unity. So I pray that this time has been informative. Unfortunately, our Facebook platform, for some reason, Facebook is down, but we are on YouTube right now streaming live. And so we will have our social media ministry to take this video, edit it, and put it on our Facebook page so many people can watch it, because this was some very, very needed and necessary conversations that we've had today. And I pray that you've been blessed as well as challenged by this conversation. Those of you who are watching now and those of you who will watch it later, thank you for being with us this evening. We thank all of our panelists for coming and taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. Let's pray. Gracious God, our Father, we thank you now for this time to gather and assemble to talk about issues surrounding our community. We thank you, Lord, for just who you've made us as a people, that against all odds, Lord, you always somehow or another, you keep letting us get back up and standing back up and keep fighting. And we know that we have a lot of challenges as a people across our nation. When we look at Black America, we know that the system is not set up for us to succeed. We do thank you for the progress that has been made in this community as well as in this country. And we thank you for those on the other side of town who have made lasting investments into this church fellowship and into this community. I think about the playground that you've blessed us with through their resources. I think about the computer lab. I think about televisions. I think about an after-school program that we once had, and then even a food pantry where many donated to it. And so we would not, dare not use a stereotype to say one thing about a whole group of people, but we know they're good people. But yet we do also know we have some great challenges. And sometimes the other races are sometimes silent, and their silence is complicit. And we need help, and our people are crying out. But we thank you, like you told Moses, I've seen their cries, I've seen their affliction, I've heard their cries, and I've come to deliver them. And we pray, Lord, that through our efforts that you will deliver us, that you will give us favor, you will give us the resources, that you will bring about a change in culture, not only in Shiloh, but in our community, in any church that worships in your name in our community. We pray, Lord, that you would bring us together, even as a nation, as a community, so that all of us will have a better quality of life. We thank you for what you're going to do, and we thank you in advance, because we know that it's already done. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, we do pray. And everyone said amen. 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 Thank you all so much.
Yes.
Well,
Do it again. Do it again.
Whenever, let me know. I gotta get going because I'm behind schedule. I'm way behind schedule.
Hey, now, hey, hold.
You say you pick up trash?
Yes. Can you do something tomorrow for me?
Tomorrow? I'll be back over in the morning. Where?
Out there in the campgrounds where the old fairgrounds used to be.
Oh,
I got a
okay,
trailer
so-
house. No, behind that real building, behind that. I got a trailer house back there that's great. It's got trash. It's gotta be up this week.
I'll go back there tomorrow.
Can you do it for $250? Check it out and tell me you can do it for $250.
I'll call. Let me get over there and I'll give you a call and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right?
Sir, and George, as always, he said.
Thank you so much. Do you have any cash out?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Are you at your office? Because our finance lady car broke down, and I wanted to give you guys a honorary for coming. I'll bring it by your office this week. Okay. And the same thing with Mr. Pickens. Her car broke down. She wasn't able to make it. That was actually good. And I'll bring it.
Let's keep this going.
I want to speak to my alumni. I graduated in 76.
We'll see you again.
No, I was in Austin. Yeah.